Mom whispered, "Don't be jealous of your brother." I stood up, revealed $26,670 in transfers, and said, "Then tell him to pay all the bills." The night my dad joked I'd never be as good as my brother, I set down my fork and picked up 4 years of receipts. That was the moment I realized the punchline wasn't funny. It was me. Hi, I'm Elias. At 26 years old, I am the eldest son and the rock-solid one. I am also the one who uses a Ziploc bag to store extra batteries and emergency funds. I always make sure to pay my rent in full and on time. I always arrive ahead of schedule. Because we always seem to run out of chairs at family cookouts, I always bring folding chairs. My parents would use the word responsible to sum me up if you ask them. Quiet would be their response to your request for the second word. The polar reverse is true with Julian, my younger brother. His charisma and infectious smile make him the team's hero, and even get waiters to bring him complimentary pastries. He's the one my folks are always gushing over. A new job, a new car, and a real estate friend who knows someone huge are just a few of Julian's recent highlights in every family update. The fact that Julian is sparkling is evidence that we're doing well as a family, according to their incantation-like words. Julian was the primary singer, and I was just the background music, I used to say. My parents' back hurts, and my mom shouldn't be on a ladder, so I started working extra shifts and still showed up around age 20 to fix their Wi-Fi and change their light bulbs. At that point, the jokes ceased being amusing. No one ever checked in with me to see how I was doing. Who could I help? They inquired. We celebrated Mom's birthday at my parents' house 2 months ago. A combination of lemon cleanser and grilled chicken wafted through the house. Dad wore his best polo shirt. In an effort to make the area seem more luxurious, Aunt Lillian continually switching up the floral arrangements. I brought a bakery-bought carrot cake. Mom prefers the one topped with a generous amount of cream cheese icing. No dessert or card, just a smile, and Julian's tale of nearly meeting someone from a startup. That's all he brought as he strode in late. Like he had won a prize, everyone was laughing at him. We took a seat. Mom received a scarf from Aunt Lillian and a candle from the wife of Dad's co-worker, among other presents. Presented in a little box were Julian's earrings. It was real silver, he quipped with a wink. Who paid? He remained mum about. As if given the moon, Mom let out a gasp. Somehow I thought you would want me to express my gratitude for the cake. It's my fault. As I looked across at my dad, he refilled his wine glass and muttered, "You know, Elias, you'll never be as good as your brother." He chuckled as if it were a harmless joke. Even Mom let out a chuckle. There was a chorus of tables. With the loudest chuckle was Julian. That was a serious statement, not a joke, to me. Down it goes, my fork. In my mind, my cheeks were flushed. In the past year, I have tallied 11 months of paying for their electricity when Dad's hours were reduced, 31 gas fill-ups when Mom's car needed a little help, 21 grocery transfer receipts since the fridge was empty, and your brother is between paychecks. I'm counting like breathes. According to Aunt Lillian, who was observing me, I wasn't crying, and she warned me not to be overly sensitive. My state of mind was altered. My mother softly spoke over the silence. "We simply want you to be more ambitious, that's all." In response, I grabbed for my glass of water. Glass trembled slightly. I reminded myself to take it easy. Nose up. Laugh it off. I am the peacemaker, so please don't disturb me. Aunt Lillian then looked across at Julian and whispered, "You truly are the breadwinner." Mother gave a subtle nod in agreement. The sound of a faint laugh escaped Dad's lips. "He's the one we can rely on." For some reason, that was the line that made me feel the most vulnerable. Rely was a powerful word. The portion of me that remembers account numbers, Wi-Fi passwords, and the precise model of the refrigerator filter was affected, as was the part that records spreadsheets of due dates, bank transfers, and receipts. Silence engulfed me. I helped put the food away, clean down the counter, and clear the plates. Mom embraced me tightly as I reached for my coat, but she avoided looking me in the eyes as she muttered, "Try not to be jealous of your brother." Julian gave me a shoulder rub as I was leaving. "Dude, don't take it personally." Beside me, the porch light intermittently flickered. Keys in hand, I stood beneath it, transfixed by their laughter as I listened through the window. I recalled the Zelle message from earlier that day. $220 was sent to Mom for groceries. The same careless way I always did it, I had sent it. "We love you. Bring paper towels next time. We're out." No heart emoji, but my phone rang with a message from Mom. "No, I'm sorry. Presenting only a list." Quietly, I made my way home. Despite the fact that it was half empty, I placed the carrot cake box in my refrigerator. As I reclined on the couch, I beheld the digital receipts folder that I'd been amassing for what seemed like an eternity, almost like an odd hobby. Little green check marks, $80, $115, $400, $900. There was a haze. I listened to Dad's message twice the following morning. "Hey kiddo, don't be dramatic. Family jokes." I chose not to take the call. The next thing I knew, I was opening my banking app and scrolling aimlessly. It hit me that night that I was the one in the joke. While I was in the midst of coming to that revelation, I was looking at the date of a utility transfer when my screen lighted up with a group chat notification, "Family dinner on Sunday at 6 o'clock. Remember," Mom wrote. As I lingered over the words, a subtle shift occurred within me. As a good son, I started putting money aside when I was 21 years old. "The power bill is a little high this month. Can you spot us $135? I'll pay you back on Friday," my dad called me one January after a snowstorm. He never paid me back. Even though he never repaid me, he did ask me for money in February, saying, "We're short on gas money." Just until payday. In March, he asked for food. On an hourly basis, I was making $17.50 while working at a computer support desk. Your mom's trying to stretch it. A shaky table and a sofa I bought on Facebook Marketplace were my furnishings in my studio apartment. I was strapped for cash, but I could scrimp and save $50 here and $75 there. Being of service felt good. I was building trust, I assured myself. At the age of 22, it had moved beyond spot us and into the realm of routine. Utility bills totaling $200 were sent out on a monthly basis. Gas is $80 every third Sunday. Wednesdays at random, $40 to $100 for food. The total for nearly 4 years was about $640 each month. Some additional months. It cost them $470 to get new tires for their car. My original $350 deposit for their broken water heater ended up being $150 plus $250 plus, we'll square it later. Julian had a few unanticipated crises. To sign up for a certification test, he need $200. A jerk is his landlord. "Can you cover half the rent for this month?" He had a slow month with freelancing. Julian was a man of endless tales. Every time I needed a transfer, I could handle it. The topic of repaying me was never broached. Assumption was made. Help, appreciation, and debt were all implicit in my family. Although my app did not contain any text, it did capture everything. Once, I made an effort to establish limits. I informed Mom that I would need to replenish my funds before I could send money. A heavy sigh escaped her lips. This vow lasted for 2 weeks before we broke it. "We'll die before we ask you again." A heart and a shopping list were her texts. Cents was sent. She had that frightened voice that would open your wallet whenever she said, "Just this once," and I understood how empty a fridge felt, so I wrote her a message. Both time and money were involved. After watching 3 videos on YouTube, I was able to fix their Wi-Fi, install a thermostat, and replace the faucet in the bathroom. To his interviews, I drove Julian. I revised his CV. Not only that, but I also gave him permission to use my address instead of constantly changing his. Mom sent me pictures of the bare pantry as his name began to pop up on packages like sneakers, a drone, and a gaming headset. Dad would make fun of my exhaustion by saying, "That's adulthood, kiddo." Aunt Lillian would counter with, "Families aren't ledgers." Well, in our household, the ledger was in my pocket. The bias was obvious. Mom would scold Julian for a week if he even brought takeout once. After I offered to pay for their electricity for 2 months, she assured me, "We're all doing our part." I made the reservation and paid for our 4-person supper on Father's Day. "You shouldn't have," Dad remarked before turning to Julian to probe his ambitious aspirations at an unemployed company. Their real-time rewriting was the most frustrating aspect. Aunt Lillian wanted to know who had helped with the water heater last Thanksgiving. Seeing Julian, Mom grinned. I glanced at my bank app beneath the table and noticed that the plumber had deposited $250. Our boy made some calls. I remained silent. Refraining from being overly dramatic is easier said than done. My personal existence, however, was quite insignificant. I wasn't struggling, but every week I would push off that one expense or skip out on a supper with friends because I had to send $200 at 3 o'clock for immediate vehicle coverage. I hit a savings ceiling. I pretended I was busy when my coworkers arranged a weekend getaway. I opted out. My spreadsheet was with me. I used to believe they were unaware. I mean, maybe they had a hazy mental image, but I knew they were aware. Julian would text, "You're a lifesaver, man." I'll pay you back when my commission hits. Mom would say things like, "You're so dependable," and then add, "Since you're so good with money," Dad would call on payday and just check in. So they knew. Saved on commission. It was new shoes. Specifically, 3 instances are quite noteworthy. My mother embraced me like if I had given her a gym towel for Christmas, the year I got her a weighted blanket. She sobbed when Julian offered her a spa certificate that he had received free from a friend. A sticky note reading, "Elias, could you Venmo $150? We're short on rent," was discovered on the counter when I woke up at the end of the night. The second incident was when I had to use the brakes on my car. I needed to decide quickly whether to pay my mechanic or give my parents $220 for their overdue power bill. I covered theirs. Mom shared a Facebook snapshot from a restaurant 3 weeks down the road. The caption said, "Much needed date night." I panned the camera until the pixels blurred, focusing on the wine cups. The third event was the lemon cleaner night, which brought on the "you will never be as good" laughs and the crushing weight of the term "rely" on my chest. I went back to the first transfer I ever sent, $120 on January 14, 2019, after their group conversation pinned me about paper towels that night. The note simply read, "Just until Friday." I included everything. My final tally was $26,670. I did not include receipts for cash, gas, or the air conditioning repair that I charged to my card but did not use. A new car, a down payment, or a large enough mattress to sleep on without waking up in a panic at 3 o'clock in the morning can be purchased for $26,670. One possibility was to print out the list. The idea of destroying the screenshots crossed my mind. I opted out. Tea was brewed. There was silence as I sat. I attempted to verbalize my emotions. Anger wasn't it. A dry well sound, indicative of depletion. Family jokes was Dad's voicemail message the following morning, and I knew then that it wasn't a joke. A system it was. I served as a conduit for their stories, while they were the storytellers. The following text arrived promptly because systems continue to function until an operator turns them off. Julian. Hey, you around? I'm $400 short on rent this month. I'd ask Mom and Dad but they're tight. I'll hit you back when I can. You're the best. He included an emoji for flex. I lingered staring at the screen. Before erasing it, I typed, "Let me think." After a couple of days, Mom sent a text message with a smiling face. "We need you Sunday." Dad looked at the bills, and it's not pretty. "Bring your checkbook. The bank book must be brought. Here is the screenshot." It went unanswered. A blank document awaited me as I skipped work for the day. My entry for transfers was at the top. I spent 2 hours listing quantities and dates. The 9 pages were printed. I placed them in an inexpensive dollar store binder. I had had enough of acting like this was air, even if I wasn't sure I would utilize it. That oppressive heat before the thunder hit on Sunday. Because arriving unprepared is a certain way to create an argument before it ever begins, I parked 2 houses down and brought a shopping bag, with paper towels within. Someone rang the bell. Dad acted like a principal by opening the door. At the table, Mom had a stack of envelopes and a calculator. While perusing his phone, Julian rested his elbow on the counter. At last, Mom brightened the mood by saying, "We were just talking about our plan." After saying, "Great," I put the bag down. The calculator was tapped by Dad. "We've been doing the numbers. With interest rates and inflation, we need a family approach. We're thinking everyone contributes monthly until things stabilize." "Everyone," Julian said, with no eye contact. After retrieving the binder, I set it down on the table. "Before we talk about a plan, can we talk about the last 4 years?" Her eyes widened. "What's that?" "Receipts?" I said money I've sent for utilities, groceries, car repairs, rent, all of it. I might have missed a few. Dad's jaw clenched. "Elias, this is not the time to play accountant. It's exactly the time." Mom groused as she went for the binder and turned a few pages. As soon as someone said, "What money?" "We never received a single dollar from you." Everyone in the room became silent. Quiet contemplation is not it. A mist descends, dispelling the gaslighting silence. I refrained from becoming angry. Over the table I slid my phone. Open my bank app. The transfers are there, notes, dates. If you want, I can print statements. As if it were on fire, Dad pushed the phone back. "This is disrespectful." "What's disrespectful is rewriting my life while asking for my checkbook." I responded, "I've covered bills since 2019. I could list them one by one. But you can read." Julian then raised his head. Dude, why are you making this weird? It's family. Indeed, I retorted. When found out, family members don't try to hide from reality. Instead, they express gratitude. Mom's eyes widened. After all we've done for you, the greatest hits album, you're going to throw money in our faces. I drew a deep breath and said, I'm not throwing it. I'm acknowledging it. I maintained a steady hand. You've depended on me for years. You've called me dependable and then laughed about me being quiet while assigning me the bill. Today, I'm not quiet. Father leaned in. So, what do you want? A parade? A medal? I want boundaries, I responded. No more monthly transfers, no more emergency Venmos. If you need help, you ask in advance and you accept no for an answer, Julian said with disapproval. Then have him pay all the bills, I said, Dad. If I'm never as good as my brother, let the golden child be the safety net, the mother said. How dare you set brothers against each other, I retorted with composure. You did that a long time ago. The air seemed thick with gravity. Mine didn't either. It had the steady rhythm of a metronome. I was afraid I might tremble. I opted out. This isn't about getting even, I whispered more quietly. The muscles in Dad's jaw tightened as he said, this is about closure. So, you're cutting us off. I'm ending a system that's been bleeding me dry, I informed you. While Mom fixed her menacing gaze on the binder, the man inside said, I'm not your bank, I'm your son. We never asked you to. You exaggerated. Those were gifts. You love us. By saying I do, I clarified. Julian let out a harsh laugh and said, and loving you cannot mean bankrupting myself, financially or emotionally. Whatever, man. Sliding the paper towels over the counter, I grabbed the binder and made my way to the door. Elias, Mom murmured. Don't walk away. You can't just. I put my hand on the knob and muttered, I can't. And I am. I braced myself for the grill. Like a full stop, the door shut behind me. 12 missed calls sounded on my phone before I even got to my car. Then 18. After I arrived at my apartment lot, it was 31. I set the phone on the counter with its face down and proceeded to cook pasta. I ate while standing up, my gaze fixed on the binder as if it were a radioactive object. There were 47 messages on my phone that I had yet to view when I checked it. The mother. You're confused. Come back and talk this out. The father. You owe us the respect of a conversation. Lillian's aunt. Money isn't everything, sweetheart. Julian's mother. You really think this makes you the hero? That night, I chose not to respond. As if I were the most uninteresting rebel in the world, I disabled alerts, scrubbed the sink, and got into bed at 9:30. It had been months since I had 8 hours of sleep. The story machine began on Monday. Heard you blew up at dinner, you okay? My cousin texted. My grandma left a 2-minute moaning voicemail. A group message about being spoiled and losing sight of one's roots was penned by Dad. Using the praying hands emoji, Mom updated her Facebook status regarding her children's current activities. I anticipated wrath. It was the instantaneous revision of the past that caught me off guard, like a television program airing with an incorrect screenplay. From, we never asked for money, to, those were gifts, to, you never said it was hard, the tone changed and the messages became more evasive. I didn't intend to email them, but I did take screenshots of each version so I wouldn't have to rely on my recollection if something went wrong. At my workplace, I created PDF backups of the binder. In the end, I did something little that seemed rather big. Utilities, petrol, and groceries were 3 automatic transfers that I canceled after opening my bank app. When prompted, are you sure? I responded affirmatively after the app asked. Somehow my chest felt both bare and buoyant. Calls continued to pour in. On one voicemail, Mom remarked, we can start fresh, and on the other, she alternated between crying and sounding like a customer service representative. Julian made me a Venmo request for $400 with the note rent, and Dad tried to reason with him, saying, we're a unit. Everyone does their part. So, we settled on $300 every month. Previously, I turned it down. A question mark was what he sent. I remained silent. Aunt Lillian extended a coffee invitation to me during the middle of the week. I assure you, that was not an ambush. She began with an odorless powder hug before launching into her speech. She probably practiced in the car, I think. Let's not burn bridges over a misunderstanding. When I inquired, what misunderstanding? The person seemed confused. She beamed with the kind of smile that makes you look 5 years old. You embarrassed your parents. They feel attacked. Math made them feel attacked, I explained. A heavy sigh escaped her lips. You know your mother. She worries. She says you didn't tell her you were keeping track. So gratitude only counts if I don't keep a receipt, I put forward. Got it. Flew her eyes. You're being unkind. I'm being accurate. Before she could be nasty with her accuracy, I bought my own coffee and departed. The mood shifted by Friday. On Sunday there was a family meeting, and the group chat went off. I sent the message, I won't be there, before my fears had a chance to alter my words. Dad said, don't forget who raised you. Mom immediately responded, you think you're better than us now? Julian wrote back, you've always been jealous, bro. Sad. I turned off the sound. I was quite specific while making my list of food items to buy. Berries, spaghetti, salmon, and a type of yogurt that I typically don't buy because it's not essential. I purchased it. I consumed it with a spoon that was proportional to my limits. Afterwards, there were few tangible shifts. I replicated my previous savings transfer by setting up a new one with the identical dates and amounts. It was like opening a door when I saw $300 land in my account on the first of the month. A long overdue dental appointment was scheduled. I sought the assistance of a therapist by stating, I need help untangling guilt from responsibility. Quote, that's a job I do a lot at night. The want to expound, to compose a lengthy composed letter replete with images, lists and I statements, gnawed at me like a mosquito. I opted out. Performance art is the art of explaining to individuals who are determined not to listen. It was too much for me to handle. And still, the pain persisted. I was taken aback by the pain. My efforts to create a family with our finances and my silence were futile, and I longed for the family I had imagined. Weaved throughout were pleasant recollections, such as my mother's chicken noodle soup for an illness, my father's instruction in tire changing, and my friend Julian and I's laughter at ridiculous memes. Keeping up with a tax payment becomes easier when you refer to it as love. The calls decreased after the second week. It wasn't gone entirely, but the guilt did fade. Afterwards, word of the spin spread. Raising kids is hard when they forget your sacrifices. Some people think everything is about money. A neighbor shared me a screenshot of Mom's post, and the comments came pouring in. Julian uploaded a story to Instagram featuring his new sneakers and captioned them, self-made. I nearly chuckled at the caption, which said, prayers. He also included the following messages. Stay strong. And a joke about kids these days. My running career resumed. To put it mildly, my muscles required a release mechanism. 3rd mile, then 4th. I tuned onto a podcast that discussed limits. I practiced in front of the mirror after the host instructed me to say no without a paragraph. No. It almost seemed like a coded language. On Sunday the 3rd, I passed by my parents' house on my way to the petrol station to give money. Consistent practice. I parked across the street and sat there, motionless. I could see them seated at the table through the window. Nothing occupied my seat. Mixed with relief was a sense of loss for me. My hypothesis is that combination is pain. Unknown caller ID appeared the following day. Who handed Mom the candle? It was the wife of one of Dad's co-workers. Your parents are going through a tough time, she started. Could you? No, I responded. Absolute quiet. You didn't even let me finish. By saying, I didn't need to, I ended the conversation. No. There was no malice. A whole sentence. I was fine after I ended the call. A collections agency emailed me 1 week later, purporting to be from my parents but really sent to me due to the fact that my address was on an outdated form. In arrears, $312. It was something I would have taken calmly a year ago. This is your bill, not mine, was the subject line I used while sending it to my parents. I typed and deleted 20 versions of, I'm not, before Mom's response. Why are you being cruel? Happened. I put the laptop away. I got out and ran. Julian, not my parents, had left me a message in my inbox when I returned. Message. Be real, bro. We all know you like holding this over us. You always wanted to be the hero. Congrats. You win. My wrath welled up as I glanced at it. Subdued, but pointed. I just wanted to say, I wanted to be his son. That was my response. His response was non-existent. That evening, I made a rule for myself that, when written down, looks ridiculous. I will not open my banking app after 9 p.m. At 9 o'clock in the morning, nothing there will help my family. On the opposite side of the room, I set my phone down. Resting was my goal. It is my current understanding that is contained here. Even though I love them, I will not support their denial. Being reliable does not mean I am a doormat. I have the authority to decline and omit the paragraph in order to ensure everyone's comfort. Nobody owes me anything when I'm exhausted. Nobody owes me anything with my savings. I am not obliged to be the one who simplifies other people's life at the cost of my own. No more money transfers from me. Not because I'm always furious, but occasionally I am. I don't want them to hurt because I justify it. Not me. But I've had enough of acting like nothing is wrong. Case by case, I will assess if their requests for help are made in good faith, being explicit, detailed and respectful. My limits are not the issue, and I will not stand for it if they try to guilt me or change the past. You can find the binder in my closet. Very seldom do I glance at it. This isn't a medal. Here's proof that I'm not completely insane. A record. Whenever uncertainty arises, I open a book, read a few lines, and then put it down. I can stop keeping score. The computation was completed. In some cases, mom and dad still use texting. Photographs of the canine are sent. For all the years I was of service, they never once thanked me. They may never do it though, that is their account. Nowadays, mine is different. My name is Elias, commences the sentence, however reliable is absent at the conclusion. Honoring oneself is the last step. I'm establishing a fresh pattern. Pancakes and jogs on Sunday mornings are my jam. My personal savings are to be deposited on the 1st of every month. I like to call a friend and make plans so I don't back out on the 3rd Sunday. Close the binder. This isn't about revenge, sums it up perfectly. It's the one line I wish someone had told me when I was 21. This pertains to finalization. Lastly, I make this solemn vow to myself. I will not allow anyone to treat my love like a bill. My family erased my 18th birthday to comfort my sister. Within 2 years I watched their finances, marriage, and reputation collapse. 3 days before my 18th birthday, my parents canceled my party so my sister could recover from a canceled vacation. That's when I stopped being the dependable son and started being the unpaid staff, and I began to plan my exit. Currently, I am a 23-year-old male, but my story begins when I turned 21 2 years ago. Seraphine, my 27-year-old sister, has been the shining star in our family ever since she was born. When she has an adult tantrum, people in restaurants stare at her because she has full-blown princess syndrome. Roland, our dad, is a mid-sized builder who specializes in bespoke homes. He grew up in a Phoenix suburb. Maris, mom, is a real estate representative for a posh company that caters to seniors and IT executives, selling them mansions worth millions of dollars. They earn about $250,000 annually when they work together. We had the Arizona dream, a large house in a gated community, a pool for summer fun, and a 2-car garage, so we were comfortably upper middle class. That ought to have been sufficient to ensure the happiness of both children, didn't it? Oh, I see. At a young age, Seraphine discovered that if she cried or threw a tantrum, she would get her way. When she didn't get her way, she would have tantrums fit for a jealous toddler. She would fling herself on the floor, scream till her face flushed red, and threaten to injure herself. The pattern had already been established by the time I reached an age when I could comprehend what was going on. For her 18th birthday, she received a shiny white BMW with expensive custom wheels. However, I was given my dad's beat-up work truck, which had 210,000 miles on the clock, rust patches, and an AM-only radio. The difference was glaring. During her 6 years of intermittent college attendance, she received a monthly stipend of $4,500, while I worked a 28-hour week at a nearby gym to cover the costs of gas, clothing, and school supplies. After Seraphine's third-room makeover in 2 years, her parents shelled out $10,000 for a set of designer pieces from a Scottsdale boutique. They advised me to become financially responsible when I requested for assistance in purchasing AP class textbooks. Without hesitation, her sorority sisters paid the full $8,000 for her month-long European vacation. The family budget was tight that month, they explained, when I asked to go to a leadership camp that cost $600. It was frustrating because the examples went on and on. In Seraphine's junior year, she was texting and driving when she crashed her BMW. I received a penalty for exceeding the speed limit in a school zone, and my dad purchased her an even more recent model while stating, "Accidents happen." I was fined and grounded for a month. She had to spend a lot of money on tutoring after failing organic chemistry twice. Sure thing. With their budget, they were able to employ the perfect tutor. Calculus was a challenge for me. Resolve the issue independently. You're competent enough. Now here's the catch. As she wreaked havoc on the family, I was the one who really kept everyone together. Seraphine treated college like a summer camp, partied all the time and skipped courses, whereas I worked part-time, volunteered at an animal shelter, tutored younger students for free, and took care of most of the housework that grown-ups should have been doing. I managed to keep my GPA at 4.33. While Mom was busy showing homes to clients, I kindly remembered to pay the water bill. After a long day on the job, my dad's back started to hurt, so I offered to pick up his dry laundry. I was the one responsible for going food shopping, making supper plans, and stocking the pantry. I was the one who made actual and metaphorical repairs to Seraphine's mess. Because Seraphine was emotionally vulnerable and still finding herself, my parents rationalized all of this by claiming she needed more attention due to her heightened sensitivity. The opposite was true for me. I was self-reliant and mature for my age, so I didn't require nearly as much supervision as other kids my age. Instead of praising and supporting me, they made it appear like my dependability and expertise were grounds to be ignored. They behaved as if my successes were routine every time. They pretended every time Seraphine had a setback that the whole family needed to rally behind. Worst of all, they had credited Seraphine for any success that came from using me to fix her difficulties. I devoted a whole weekend to assisting my dad in evaluating the damage, finding replacement parts, and negotiating with insurance companies when she had an accident involving her BMW during her junior year. After months of guiding her through high school level material, she passed organic chemistry on her third try. I was the one who had to go to the jail at 4 o'clock in the morning to get her when she was jailed for underage drinking at a frat party. That was too much for my parents to handle, both emotionally and disappointed. Who was lauded the most though, when Seraphine finally earned her community college diploma, albeit 2 years later than expected. Yes, she did. In response, Mom would express her pride in her child's resilience. I was ignored and unappreciated while the family treated me like an unpaid intern, essential to their operations but unnoticed. I promised myself that when I turned 19, things would be different. At last, I would have reached the age of proper adulthood. At last, they would have to treat me with the dignity due an equal family member. At last, I would receive some acknowledgement for all the hard work I put in to keep this family running well while they were preoccupied with their troublesome golden kid. Regarding the outcome, I was completely mistaken. So, I'm going to be 19 years old in 2 years. I thought this was going to be massive. Legal adulthood, graduation from high school in a few months, early entrance to Arizona State with partial scholarships based on my GPA and extracurricular activity. This birthday had been on my wish list for what felt like an eternity. I longed for a change. To be the center of attention for reasons other than rescuing someone else or evading the consequences of my own dysfunctional family, and to feel appreciated for my own unique qualities and achievements. My parents were asked if it would be possible to throw a lovely celebration. Just some relatives and close friends, maybe 25 or 30 people in all, nothing extravagant or extravagantly priced. We could host it in our backyard, complete with a BBQ, music, and all the trimmings. Even better, I offered to chip in some of my own savings from working to cover the cost. Both parents appeared to be enthusiastic about the concept. Our baby's becoming a man, Mom would tell her friends and clients again and over. Because he felt it would be a great way to relive some childhood memories, Dad even offered to hire one of those inflatable obstacle courses. After weeks of preparation, we finally sent out the right invites 3 weeks in advance, had a special cake made by the posh bakery downtown, and arranged the entire menu of grilled hot dogs, burgers, and sides. I even enlisted Mom's help in compiling an age-appropriate playlist. My favorite instructor, who had written recommendation letters and believed in me when nobody else did, my best friend Dorian, my girlfriend Alara, my wrestling teammates, and the boys from the gym were all invited. I even lost my employer, who had been more like a father figure and mentor to me. This was going to be my chance to prove to everyone that the shy, responsible youngster had achieved his dreams. With my acceptance to a prestigious university, scholarship funds, and network of supportive friends and family, I felt prepared to take the next step into adulthood. But Seraphine's spring break trip to Cancun was canceled precisely 3 days prior to the celebration. For months, she and her college pals had planned this trip. A week at a pricey resort with $400 per night suites, continuous parties at beachside bars, professional photo shoots for Instagram, the complete influencer lifestyle she was always pursuing. For her share of the resort, airfare and spending money, Dad had already spent $4,500. She had squandered weeks trying on bikinis, tanning beds, and fancy duffel bags. However, there was a huge rift in her friend circle due to drama that I failed to comprehend. Out of nowhere, the trip was canceled, deposits were misplaced, and Seraphine found herself stranded at home over her spring break, with no plans whatsoever. She was completely out of her mind when she returned home on Friday afternoon. I mean a complete nuclear meltdown, complete with sobbing, yelling, hurling objects in her room, slamming doors, and everything in between. This vacation had been her incentive to do well in her classes that semester, and she was looking forward to it. Without delay, my parents shifted into crisis mode. In an effort to be there for her, Mom canceled 3 client meetings and risked losing commissions by calling in sick. Dad postponed his plans to play golf and poker with friends this weekend. They contacted her therapist to set up an urgent appointment, ordered her favorite Thai cuisine from the pricey restaurant across town, and ran a bubble bath with her beloved, but expensive, bath bombs. They dealt with her as if she were mourning a loss rather than letting her miss out on a vacation that was out of reach for most people. On Saturday morning, at 7 a.m., I'm helping Seraphine set up the decorations and prepare the food for my party, which is less than 24 hours away. Seraphine, dressed in her silk pajamas, comes downstairs, her eyes still puffy and red from her theater festival. She declared as if giving a medical diagnosis. "I can't handle having a party here tomorrow. I'm too emotionally fragile right now. The noise and all those people will trigger my anxiety about the trip situation and set back my emotional recovery." It seemed as if my stomach had collapsed. "Brittany, it's my birthday party. We've had this planned for weeks. People are already planning to come." "I understand, and I apologize for the timing," she murmured, her tears beginning to fall again. "But I'm going through something really traumatic right now. I need the house to be calm and peaceful so I can process my feelings about this disappointment. Having a party would be really insensitive to my current emotional state." As soon as Seraphine began to make great sense, Mom began nodding along. "She has a point. Honey, your sister is dealing with a lot of disappointment and rejection right now. This Cancun situation has really shaken her confidence." The news seemed so unbelievable to me. "Mom, it's my 18th birthday. This is a major milestone. People are already expecting to come. I invited my teacher, my boss, Alara's parents." At that moment, Seraphine revealed her hidden strength. "If you really cared about me as your sister, you'd postpone it until I'm feeling better. Family should support each other during difficult times, not make things worse by being selfish." Without waiting for me to finish speaking, my dad stormed into the kitchen and took her side in the argument. "Son, your sister needs us right now. You're strong enough to handle a little disappointment. She's not built the same way you are." "But Dad, everyone's expecting to celebrate tomorrow. I've been planning this for weeks. I ordered a cake, bought decorations, planned the whole menu." As he firmly stated, "We'll reschedule for next weekend," he seemed to be mentally shifting gears to discuss something else. "Family comes first. And right now, your sister needs our support more than you need a party. You'll have plenty of other birthdays." The callous disregard for my significant birthday, the callous disregard for me as an individual who mattered, felt like a physical blow to the stomach. This was about more than just the postponement of a celebration. For nearly 18 years, whenever Seraphine experienced a problem or crisis, I was treated as though my needs, feelings and achievements were irrelevant. Canceling everything took up the remainder of Saturday while I made embarrassing phone calls. My partner was bewildered and upset that I would cancel at the 11th hour. It was disappointing for my pals, and a few of them had plans for the weekend after that. When she wanted to know if I was all right at home, my teacher questioned if everything was all right. I canceled my own birthday celebration, and my boss was nice, but he plainly felt it was strange. My family canceled my birthday party due to my sister's trip turmoil, and I couldn't bring myself to admit it. So, I lied, and said I was unexpectedly sick. It was intolerable to be embarrassed. Seraphine, meanwhile, sunk into a fancy bikini and spent the day sharing depressing Instagram stories about overcoming setbacks and finding serenity under unforeseen circumstances. She didn't appear to be dealing with mental anguish. Rather, she appeared to be enjoying a spa day. I made a decision that would alter the course of my life that night as I sat alone in my room on the eve of my major celebration. I had had enough of being this family's go-getter, problem solution, and unpaid housekeeper. My family paid me zero attention the morning after my actual 18th birthday. There was no effort to make this Sunday special by wishing the celebrant a happy birthday, having a special breakfast, or exchanging gifts. It seemed like Sunday was just another weekday when it came to my birthday. Mom was too busy making Seraphine her favorite protein smoothie with pricey organic ingredients, and Dad was already at a construction site. Even though it was just another day at the house, I felt like an unseen child being treated like an adult. At some point around midday, Seraphine had the gall to say that my silence and disconnection were dampening the atmosphere. "I'm sorry your party had to be canceled, but it's not my fault," she remarked as she ate her mom's elegant brunch and texted. "You don't have to take your bad mood out on everyone else. Some of us are dealing with real problems." Something fundamental cracked inside of me at that moment. Options that I'd never given much thought to before became apparent to me. At this point, I had reached the age of majority, which granted me all the privileges and rights as an adult. 2 years of working out at the gym had put some money away for me. The families of my acquaintances treated me with the respect and admiration I deserved. Having accepted to college, received scholarships, and maintained satisfactory academic standing, allowed me to establish my own life apart from those who obviously did not respect or regard me. From the comfort of my room, I began to make strategic phone calls. A call to my wrestling coach was my first step. His family had been nothing but welcoming to me, and I had a feeling they had a spare bedroom since their eldest son had gone off to university. Upon hearing my broad description of the situation, they promptly extended an offer to let me remain with them for as long as I required. "You're like a son to us anyway," his wife added as she picked up the phone. "We'd be honored to have you here during your senior year." Secondly, while at the gym, I contacted my supervisor. He kept pushing me to work additional hours and brought up the fact that his other store across town was in need of dependable staff. He told me he could start me off at 30 hours per week right away when I inquired about the prospect of full-time employment. "You're the most responsible kid I've ever hired," he stated. "If you need more income for independence, I've got opportunities for you." The third thing I did was dial the home number of my school counselor. Upon hearing the news, she was horrified and promised to assist me in planning how to complete my senior year on my own. "What your parents did was completely inappropriate," stated the woman. "An 18th birthday is a major milestone, and canceling it for the reasons you described shows a serious problem with family priorities." I developed a thorough strategy for autonomy by Sunday night. Going to school, working my regular shifts at the gym, and taking care of my typical domestic duties were all parts of my seemingly ordinary week that followed. My folks were pleased with how I was handling disappointment and thought my attitude had changed for the better. They had no idea that I was clandestinely packing up my most prized possessions and preparing to leave the house. Several things every day to my coach's house, my most prized possessions, including my paperwork, electronics, finest clothing, books, wrestling medals, and everything else that truly mattered to me. In addition, I ceased attending to the myriad details that ensured the house ran efficiently. I failed to inform Dad of the approaching due dates for his bills. I failed to update Mom's calendar or manage her client documentation. Forgot to tidy up any random spills around the house. Skimped on grocery shopping and meal planning. My birthday was postponed, and I completed the task the following Saturday, precisely 1 week later. I hung around till Seraphine's parents were gone, and she was spending her unearned money at the mall. I methodically emptied my room of all of my possessions, placing the remaining items into trash bags and cartons. My house key and a message were left on my bed. Since my needs, feelings, and milestones don't seem to matter in this family, I've decided to go somewhere they do. Don't contact me unless you're ready to genuinely apologize and make real changes to how you treat me. I'll finish high school and start my adult life with people who actually value and respect me. This isn't a tantrum or a phase. This is me choosing to surround myself with people who treat me like I matter. Having packed up my entire life into my trusty old truck, I drove away from the place I had called home for the past 18 years, knowing full well that I would never set foot inside again. Feelings of relief and liberation washed over me instantly. I was making a life-altering choice for the first time ever without considering anybody else's needs or wants but my own. Excuse me, everyone. This new hype function was just introduced by YouTube. Hit the hype button if you're absolutely engrossed in this narrative. It sends a message to YouTube that this video is worthy of going viral, and it keeps sending you even wilder stories. Your support is much appreciated. Okay, let's return to the drama. Spending time with my coach's family was like entering a different world where kids are truly treasured, encouraged, and handled with dignity. Instead of treating me like a paid employee, they welcomed me with open arms, inquired about my day, and engaged me in family choices. When I moved in with my new friends, I finally felt like I was part of a family. At the same time, it was interesting and fulfilling to see my original family disintegrate without me to keep everything together. Within days, the initial symptoms manifested. For the most part, I had been the one to take care of the household's administrative needs, such as sending out reminders for bills and appointments, going grocery shopping, arranging meals, and keeping everything organized. Immediate neglect set in when I was no longer around to serve as the family's unpaid personal assistant. They went 3 weeks without paying their mortgage, piled up late penalties on a number of credit cards, and mom lost a big customer due to her forgetfulness over a critical deadline. Something I would have ordinarily taken care of. Yet Seraphine wreaked havoc. Let me explain. Without me, my parents were left to handle her issues on their own, without the benefit of my mediation, buffer, and problem-solving abilities. And did she have issues that were building up like a nuclear explosion. To start, she was placed on academic probation after failing 2 classes that semester. She was at a loss without me to guide her, correct her work, and complete much of her schoolwork. Because she had always relied on me for assistance, she had never mastered the skills necessary to succeed academically, like studying, researching, and time management. Because Seraphine didn't connect with the instructor's approach, she often skipped lessons, forcing her father to pay a hefty $75 per hour for private tutoring. Yet again, she was taken into custody. Specifically, for stealing from a Scottsdale high-end store. She had apparently been pilfering cosmetics, accessories, and clothing for a considerable amount of time. A $300 purse was her target when the shopkeeper apprehended her and decided to seek charges. Dad spent thousands on legal representation, restitution, and court expenses. The most distressing aspect was that her motivation for stealing was not financial need but rather the excitement of the chase and a sense of entitlement. The most tragic finding, though, was the realization that she had been steadily stealing from her parents for quite some time. Once I left, no one was there to assist keep the accounts in order, explain away mysterious spending, or make up for lost funds. They found out she had been stealing money from mom's purse, making illicit purchases with dad's credit cards, and even forging checks. Over the course of 2 years, an astounding sum of more than $35,000 was spent without authorization. Expenditures that may have covered my education costs. Sums of money that could have guaranteed their old age. Instead of eventually confronting her, they reinforced their support for her actions. Her mounting debt and legal bills were paid for by her dad through a second mortgage on the house. To make ends meet, mom began working 7 days a week. The neighborhood gossip network, shared contacts, and social media allowed me to see how everything developed. In every photo, my parents appeared weary and anxious. The public perception of their picture-perfect family was crumbling. They made repeated attempts to contact me. They begged me to return home, to be the strong one and help the family through this tough time, and to be the mature one and figure things out in a series of ever more desperate voicemails. But take note of the one thing that was absent from each and every one of the messages. Any regret for postponing my birthday. I was treated unfairly, and it was never acknowledged. It was all just guilt trips about how their lives were harder without me. The voicemails from Dad would say, "Please son, we need you here. Your sister is really struggling without you to help her, and your mom and I don't know how to handle all these problems on our own." However, I maintained my composure and ignored all of their efforts to get in touch with me. My new environment was perfect for me. I worked 30 hours a week, trained with the wrestling team, and kept my 4.2 GPA. I also made real friends who cared about me. Rather than spending my life rescuing other people's disasters, I was finally enjoying life to the fullest. When I was a high school senior with honors and a full athletic scholarship to Arizona State, my first family's predicament had already spiraled out of control. After Seraphine was expelled for academic dishonesty, she decided to quit college altogether. She was found out to have plagiarized papers, paid others to take her online exams, and even turned in work that she had taken from other students. The icing on the cake was her attempt to bribe a professor into changing her assessment. A dubious online program offered her a degree in business management in just 6 months, and her father was so anxious to secure her future that he spent $15,000 to enroll her. The whole affair was obviously a fraud that duped them out of a certificate's value and added to their debt. Because she was emotionally exhausted, preoccupied, and unable to concentrate on her clients, mom's real estate career was in shambles. Without my assistance in keeping organized, she would never have missed appointments, forgotten deadlines, or made such simple mistakes, costing her multiple big sales. The highly competitive Phoenix real estate market was taking a toll on her reputation. Additionally, Dad's construction company was having trouble. A number of expensive errors in project bids and material estimates had been made by him in my absence when it came to documentation, organization, and fundamental company management. In addition, he had taken out large loans against the company to pay for Seraphine's several emergencies. The icing on the cake, though, was their community status and social reputation. You see, many in our tight-knit suburban neighborhood had begun to take note of things. The local police blotter, which is published in the weekly newsletter, had reported Seraphine's legal difficulties. They began to miss out on social occasions they could no longer afford after selling mom's luxury automobile and dad's yacht, revealing their mounting financial difficulty. The worst part was that people were starting to ask why I had left home. The parents of my friends, my old wrestling teammates and instructors all wanted to know more. The community's reaction to the news that Seraphine had to postpone my 18th birthday in order to accommodate her vacation drama was immediate and severe. Even though Phoenix is a large city, in our little suburban town, one's reputation and social status are quite important. At school activities and community functions, other parents began to avoid being around me. People were wary of doing business with Dad because they didn't want to be associated with someone who would treat his responsible and successful son so badly. Real estate brokers who showed good judgment and had stable family values were more popular, and Mom lost clients because of it. Her dysfunctional family became a burden for her relationship-based business. It was a public and glaring contrast. My biological family was falling apart in a dramatic way while I was having a fantastic senior year, winning wrestling bouts, receiving recognition for my academic achievements, and being lauded by both my coach's family and my teachers. Being the model family with the ideal children had become their whole sense of self-worth. That carefully crafted persona crumbled as Seraphine's issues became more public, and I was no longer there to uphold it. The frequency of the calls and messages reaching me increased to numerous times every day. The voicemails became increasingly lengthy, frantic, and disclosing of the severity of the situation's decline. Son, please. We know we made mistakes, but we need you here. Your mother is crying every night and can't sleep. The business is struggling, and I don't know how to organize everything the way you used to. People in the neighborhood keep asking about you and we don't know what to tell them. I refused to budge from my choice and ignored their repeated attempts to get in touch. In that moment, my life was perfect. I was able to attend Arizona State University on full scholarship, graduate with a 4.4 GPA, advance to the position of shift supervisor at my gym, keep my relationship with Alara strong, and make true friends with individuals that cared about me. Seraphine suffered her most significant crisis to that point around the start of my second year of college, which was around 18 months after I had left home. And this time, it wiped off my parents' social and financial status. He had convinced her that investing in cryptocurrencies would be a quick and easy way to make a lot of money, and she had become connected with him. Investing in this manner was unethical. A pyramid scheme using a fictitious currency promising 500% returns in 6 months was clearly at work here. Seraphine used her access to the family bank account to steal $45,000 from my parents' IRA and put it into this scheme. All of their savings for emergencies, retirement, and the second mortgage were accounted for in this sum. My parents lost all they had worked for over the years when the investment, along with the con artists who had made it, vanished without a trace. The financial collapse of Seraphine was considerably worse than that. Her scheme to rack up debt in my parents' names began a year ago. She used their information to open credit cards they weren't aware of, personal loans they weren't aware of, and even a car loan for a vehicle she promptly wrecked while drunk driving. She had been quite proficient at manipulating their finances. She used their family info and excellent credit to get money that they hadn't allowed. She had already gotten them legally liable for more than $80,000 in debt when they found out how bad her deception was. The entire monetary loss was more than $125,000, which was more than enough to ruin their middle-class way of life when added to their lost savings. Complete and immediate financial ruin ensued. Declaring bankruptcy was an unfortunate necessity that severely damaged their credit and professional standing. The house they had lived in for 15 years was forcibly sold. It was the house where I had spent my formative years, and the house that symbolized their aspirations for the American ideal. In their 50s, they had to confront the reality of having to start over financially, downsized to a modest 2-bedroom apartment in an undesirable section of town, and lost most of their valuables in the process. Due to financial difficulties and legal issues, Dad's construction business went bankrupt. Mom took a work at a large corporate real estate firm because she was forced to. She was underpaid, had no independence, and was treated disrespectfully. Nevertheless, the individual toll was far greater than the monetary catastrophe. Seraphine suffered a total meltdown as she was confronted with real repercussions for the first time in her 26 years of life. When others finally started holding her responsible for her decisions, she was unable to deal with the truth that she had ruined her family's stability, endure the shame and remorse, or even function. She resumed living in my parents' small apartment and became totally reliant on them for all aspects of her life, including emotional support, financial assistance, and basic life management. She was incapable of being self-sufficient, of holding a job for longer than a few weeks, and of handling even the most fundamental adult duties. In addition to living from paycheck to paycheck in tight surroundings, my financially devastated parents, who are now in their 50s, were left to care for a woman child who was 26 years old. It was extremely stressful to cope with bankruptcy proceedings while still supporting 3 adults on 2 minimum wage incomes. Their marriage was ruined by the pressure. Their inability to manage the stress, anger, and animosity that had grown up around Seraphine's behavior and their complicity in it led to their separation 6 months after being together for 26 years. After selling his firm, Dad downsized to living with his brother and took construction jobs for rival companies, where he earned a pittance. Mom worked 65 hours a week at a retail store in addition to her first job to pay the rent and buy groceries. Their impeccable reputation in the neighborhood and the ideal family image they had labored so hard to create were both utterly ruined. Their former admirers now viewed their stories as warnings against tolerating destructive behavior in grown children. In the most gratifying and vindicationary way imaginable, everything came full circle last month. I was studying for my business administration finals at my apartment near the Arizona State University campus when a number I didn't recognize called. In spite of my reservations, I responded. I had blocked all of Dad's numbers more than a year ago, so he was phoning from his brother's phone. When Dad said, "Son," I could sense the weariness, disappointment, and real despair that had built up in his voice over the years. "Please don't hang up. I know you have every right to hate us and never speak to us again. But we need to talk. We need to ask for your help." A new brokenness in his tone compelled me to listen, even though I was about to end the call at that very moment. "Your mother and I, we've lost everything. The house, the business, our savings, our marriage, our reputation in the community. We're living apart now, both working multiple minimum wage jobs just to survive. And Seraphine is completely dependent on us. But we can't even take care of ourselves anymore." For an instant, he remained silent, and I could discern his efforts to gather himself. "We know why you left. We've had 3 years to think about it, and we know we treated you terribly. We canceled your 18th birthday for something that didn't matter. And we've been paying the price ever since. You were the one holding our family together, and we threw you away like you didn't matter." His words carried an air of sincere regret and self-awareness that I had never before heard. Acknowledging the need for assistance, he made the admission. The price he paid to express those words resounded in my ears. "Not money. We know we don't deserve that, and you're a college student, but advice, guidance, someone who knows how to make responsible decisions. You're the only one in this family who has their life together. You're thriving in college. You've built a life for yourself. You've become everything we should have supported you to be from the beginning." I waited for him to complete his entire speech. He gushed about how proud they were of my maturity, independence, and grades, and how they had been secretly monitoring my social media to brag about my achievements while acting like they were still involved in my life. "People ask about you all the time," he pointed out. "They want to know how our successful son is doing in college, and we have to pretend like we still have a relationship with you when the truth is we destroyed it through our own selfishness and poor judgment." Then Mom called, and her tears were streaming down her face. "Baby, I'm so sorry. I know we don't deserve your forgiveness, but we've realized that you were the best thing about our family, and we threw it away. We don't know how to fix any of this without you. We don't know how to help Seraphine become a functional adult. We don't know how to rebuild our lives. We've made so many mistakes, but the biggest one was not valuing you when we had you." After their heartfelt remarks were over, I paused to collect my thoughts, and with the clarity and self-assurance that come from 3 years of freedom and personal progress, I told them exactly what I thought. "You're absolutely right. You don't deserve forgiveness. You canceled my 18th birthday because Seraphine's vacation got canceled. You spent my entire childhood treating me like unpaid help while giving her everything she wanted. You enabled her into becoming a financial criminal who destroyed your lives, and you did it because you couldn't bear to hold her accountable for anything." I went on. "But here's the thing," growing more confident with each syllable. "I don't need your family anymore. I've built something better without you. I have people who value me, support me, and celebrate my successes. I have mentors who believe in me, friends who respect me, and a future that I'm building through my own efforts. I don't need to be your emotional support child or your problem solver." The other end's profound and telling quiet was palpable. "However," I said, pleasantly surprised by my subsequent statements, "I'm willing to have a relationship with you under very specific conditions. First, Seraphine gets serious professional help and starts contributing to society, instead of being a drain on everyone around her. She needs to get a job, pay back what she stole, and prove she can function as an adult. Second, you both acknowledge publicly that you treated me unfairly and that my leaving was completely justified. Third, any relationship we have going forward is based on mutual respect, not your need for me to fix problems you created. Dad uttered hardly a murmur. Anything, we'll do anything you ask. And fourth, I pointed out, you need to understand that I'm not your son coming home to save the family. I'm an independent adult offering a conditional relationship to people who need to prove they've fundamentally changed how they approach family dynamics and personal responsibility. They were unwavering in their agreement and did not dally over any of the conditions. Their follow-through has been fascinating to observe for the last month. After years of being unemployed, Seraphine's father finally got her into intense treatment and secured her a part-time work at a fast food joint. Their blunders and my lawful choice to depart have been acknowledged in a public apology letter that Mom has been drafting. To overcome their enabling tendencies and develop healthier relationship patterns, they are both attending family counseling. Can I ever really let go of my grudges? Very unlikely. It took too long and caused too much damage. However, the most fulfilling form of retribution I could have imagined was seeing them crumble under the weight of their own priorities as I established my own prosperous life. My parents left me hungry and alone at 13. When my uncle died, they demanded millions, but the lawyer's secret clause left them with nothing. My parents abandoned me when I was a child, and the only person who stood up was my uncle. Years later, I'd established my own life and business, and I thought I was done with them. It turns out they had different intentions. Let's just say that things got messy. People assume that when parents abandon their child, it will result in a dramatic conflict or a screaming match. For me, it was just another frigid Tuesday morning, and I awoke to an empty apartment and a note on the counter. My life had appeared to be normal up until that point. I was Noah, 13 years old, the only child living with my parents. Dad had a modest used vehicle lot a few blocks away. If you've ever drove past one of those businesses with the inflatable tube man flying around, that was essentially his empire. He pretended to be a business tycoon, yet half of his time was spent gambling in casinos rather than selling vehicles. Mom maintained a daycare from her apartment. She kept it going for a time, but after her depression worsened, parents stopped bringing their children. When a babysitter cancels 3 days in a row, word spreads quickly. At first we appeared to be a normal family. We had Friday movie evenings with microwave popcorn, camping vacations in this worn-out tent that leaked when it rained, and cinnamon buns on Christmas morning. Nothing flashy, but it was ours. Then cracks started appearing. I'd overhear them arguing late at night. Dad would arrive home later and later, always smelling of old smoke and grease rather than dealership floor polish. Mom spent more time in bed, blinds closed. When I asked about groceries, she told me to make do with cereal or whatever crumbs we had. Dad agreed to turn it over every week. Promises were his preferred currency, as they were inexpensive and simple to spend. I tried to stay consistent, kept my grades up, cleaned the place without being asked, and didn't complain about wearing the same shoes till the soles were nearly worn through. I assumed if I was perfect enough, they'd notice and pull it together. But kids don't fix grown-ups, as I discovered the hard way. I woke up late on the day everything fell apart. Nobody shook me for school. The apartment was really quiet. Too quiet. Their bedroom door was wide open, which was unusual because Mom always shut it on bad days. I looked inside, and half the closet was empty. Drawers were emptied out, leaving socks and other miscellaneous items behind. On the kitchen counter there was a note written by Mom. "Noah, we can't do this anymore. Your Uncle Graham will take care of you. We apologize." 16 words. That was it. I dialed Mom's cell phone and it went straight to voicemail. I tried Dad's number. Already disconnected. I scoured the premises for contact information, an address book or whatever. Nothing. It's just me, the note, and stillness. That night, I stayed up on the couch, staring at the phone, as if it owed me a response. On day 2, the landlord turned up, hammering on the door about rent. I explained that my parents were gone, but he glanced at me as if he knew better. Muttered something about contacting social services. That's when terror struck. On day 3, I gave up and called my school counselor. She did not waste time. The next thing I know, Child Protective Services came knocking. Mr. Barrett, the social worker, spoke in a calm way, as if he was trying to keep me from breaking. He called, shuffled documents, and claimed they had found my father's brother, Uncle Graham. Uncle Graham had become somewhat of a ghost name in my family. I'd seen him maybe twice. My parents always referred to him as chilly, stuck up, and too obsessed with his luxury house design business. He resided in another state, never married, and had no children. But, guess what? He was the only individual who answered the phone when CPS contacted. When Graham strolled in the next morning, it was as if a whole new planet had entered our bleak apartment. Black vehicle in front, smart suit, silver cufflinks, and slicked back hair. He looked more at home in a boardroom than in my kitchen. He inspected the area, groaned and said, "Pack what you can carry. The rest can be shipped later." No hugs or sugarcoating, just down to business. And that's how my childhood ended. Quiet, untidy, and accompanied by a stranger who turned out to be the only adult in attendance. Graham did not waste time. While the CPS representative was filling out papers, he stood in the midst of our cramped living room, as if he were conducting an inventory check. He didn't seem sad. He did not appear shocked. He just seemed efficient. "One suitcase," he reminded me, "not two. We're not hauling junk." I recall gazing at my belongings, the pictures on my wall, my video games, and felt a mixture of panic and rage. But I did not argue. Something about the way he said it made it plain there was no space for compromise. I shoved all I could into a faded blue suitcase: clothes, a few books, and a photograph of me and my mother at the park. I left everything else behind. CPS would handle it, Graham stated. On the way to his house, he scarcely spoke. Every now and then he would look in the rearview mirror and inquire if I was hungry or needed to use the restroom. I wasn't sure what I was expecting. Perhaps they are comforting words. Instead, it felt as if I had been drafted into a military program. Orders only. No small talk. When we arrived at his place 3 hours later, I knew house wasn't the correct term. It was a full-blown Victorian home, the kind you'd see in a historical magazine. Tall iron fence, groomed grounds, and stone statues I couldn't identify. I stepped out of the car, still wearing the same hoodie I'd been wearing for days, and felt as if I had arrived on another planet. Graham went in after me, gave the place a quick inspection and said, "Don't touch the curtains with dirty hands. Breakfast is at 7 a.m., that's all." He then left me standing there. That night, I did not cry. I was too wired. Everything felt fleeting, as if I messed up, he'd contact CPS and send me somewhere else. I stayed awake, staring at the carved ceiling, promising myself that I'd follow his instructions until I found out an escape route in case I needed one. The rules came quickly: shoes off in the house, homework done at a desk rather than on the couch, and 1 hour of piano practice every day. It didn't matter that I had no talent. I broke practically every one within the first month, not on purpose half of the time, but simply because I wasn't used to structure. When I walked into the kitchen at 8, the stove was cold, and he was reading the paper. "Kitchen closes at 7:30, he'd remark, not looking up. No yelling or guilt trips, just penalties. That was the thing about Graham. He did not operate on emotions. He acted more like a boss than an uncle. If my schoolwork wasn't completed, my weekend plans were canceled. If I did not follow through, I would lose my privileges. He never threatened to get rid of me, however. That was the difference. Every punishment has an endpoint. And once it was finished, life returned to normal. The first break in his steel wall appeared around 2 weeks in. I was in my room, staring at an old photo of my parents' wedding day. I didn't hear him enter. He noticed me trying to wipe my tears discreetly. Instead of making a speech, he simply offered me a handkerchief, perched on the edge of the bed, and remained there until I gathered myself together. There is no advice or pity. Only presence. Strangely, that was superior to any "I'm sorry" statement. Graham's life revolved around systems. Whitaker Home Collections wasn't just a furniture store. He'd established an entire chain of luxury decor businesses spanning 3 states. He approached everything like business, including me. On weekends, he would drag me to meetings. "Watch how they talk," he'd say quietly. "See who speaks first, who gives in, and who maintains eye contact." I was 14 years old and taught negotiation skills before I could even complete algebra, but don't get me wrong, he was strict as hell. I was grounded for not polished my shoes before school. He once made me redo an essay 3 times because I wrote "cool" instead of "effective." And if I rolled my eyes, he'd raise an eyebrow and remark, "Be careful, Noah, the world will not bend just because you're irritated." But there was something solid beneath the sarcasm. Unlike my parents, he did not disappear when things became difficult. That first year, I challenged him 100 times, skipping piano, sneaking TV on weeknights, and hoping he wouldn't cast me away like my parents had. He never did. He punished me, but he stayed. And I gradually realized that this was not a one-time occurrence. Looking back, the first year with Graham laid the groundwork for everything that happened after. Address at the time, all I knew was that I'd gone from being abandoned as a child in a rundown apartment to living in a mansion with a snarky, rule-obsessed uncle who somehow convinced me that I wasn't disposable. Even though I wouldn't accept it at the time, a part of me began to wonder if this wasn't such a bad deal. Graham was not the type to let you go. He checked my public school grades and basically stated, "This won't cut it." Before I knew it, I was enrolled at Westfield Academy. The school was tough. The classes were more challenging than anything I'd ever seen. Kids were talking about summer vacations to Europe while I was still learning out which fork to use at supper thanks to Graham's incessant table etiquette drills. I felt like I was drowning throughout my first semester. I'd spend hours at my desk eating through textbooks and still barely get by. Graham's reply was not sympathetic. One night I came to dinner virtually in tears because of geometry proofs. He laid down his fork, gave me that look like I was wasting oxygen, and continued. "Your circumstances changed for no reason of your own, but your response is entirely up to you. Use the chance or waste it. I don't invest in lost causes." This irritated me, but it also hit home. He was not going to give me sympathy points. If I wanted to fit in at that school, I had to work hard, which I did. I used the allowance he granted me to hire a peer tutor. I created study groups. By junior year, I had clawed my way into the honor roll. Graham noticed. He didn't say, "Good job," or clap me on the back. He simply put a new leather briefcase on my bed one morning saying, "You'll need this." That was his version of pride. At home, punishment was not optional. I used to believe he was merely controlling, but then I learned it was for training. He wanted me to be bright, organized, and ready to work at his level. It irritated me at first, but I eventually realized that those behaviors offered me an advantage. Teachers at school would comment on how well prepared I was. Classmates wondered how I always had notes ready. Graham refused to accept mediocrity. The true conflict arose during college applications. I planned to attend State University. A group of my Westfield friends were going there, and honestly, all I wanted was something familiar. Graham was not having it. He strolled into my room one night, dropped a stack of Ivy League and top-tier school brochures and said, "Apply to these." I lost it. "Why should you worry where I go? State is a fantastic school. It's my life, not your project." He remained composed, of course. "Your friends are thinking about social lives. I'm thinking about your future. You have potential. Don't waste it hiding in your comfort zone." That continued to alarm me. "I never asked to be your project. Maybe I just want to be normal for once." His response was chilly and sharp. "And I never asked to be your guardian. Yet here we are. I'm giving you opportunities your parents never had. You're welcome." That gave me a headache. Not because he was incorrect, but because it was the first time he acknowledged the obvious. Neither of us had requested this arrangement, but we were stuck with it, and in his own way, he was attempting to provide me with an opportunity that my parents would never have given me. Later that night he finally opened up, which he nearly never did. He informed me that my father was a talented mathematician who was unable to attend college due to financial constraints. That he worked at a gas station while Graham received the scholarship. He resented me for many years. Graham remarked, "Your mother was also smart. But her prospects dried up. I will not let that happen to you." Hearing that altered everything. It did not warm him up, but it did explain why he pushed so hard. For him, this was about more than simply me. It was about breaking the cycle. I ended up applying to 7 schools just to prove that I was not intimidated. I had 5 options and chose Northwestern, a good blend of prominence and distance. When the acceptance letter arrived, Graham did not smile or cheer. He merely handed me a pen and said, "Sign it. Tuition's covered." There's no drama or sentiment, just action. I couldn't deny it, no matter how much I wanted to protest. His approach was working. By the time I prepared for college, I had changed from the kid who strolled into his mansion with only one suitcase. I was brighter, more confident, and perhaps more like him than I cared to acknowledge. College was the first time I felt like I had room to breathe. Northwestern wasn't easy, but compared to Graham's house, it was manageable. I knew how to get up early, manage my time effectively, and work harder than anyone else. While some kids were missing lessons because they partied too late, I arrived with a briefcase in hand, already 5 steps ahead. I joined clubs, challenged myself with group projects, and discovered that I had a talent for design and marketing strategy. Graham's observe everything lessons paid off. I could read a room, figure out who was lying, and utilize silence to coerce individuals into filling holes. It made presentations feel more like negotiations, which instructors observed. Graham didn't soften much while I was gone, but the distance altered our relationship. Calls grew less formal. He would occasionally crack a snarky joke. When I complained about the dining hall cuisine, he remarked, "Good. Consider it training for the real world, where everything tastes bland if you're doing it right." I worked at Whitaker Home Collections every summer. Graham didn't only assign me easy jobs, he moved me between departments as if he were testing me. Inventory one summer, vendor negotiations the next, followed by marketing. By the time I graduated, I knew the company inside and out. After graduation, I relocated back to the mansion. This time, not as a misplaced child, but as the company's new marketing director. We had a routine. Two independent men share a home. Occasionally they eat together, and occasionally they just pass each other with nods. It was pleasant. Strict, but pleasant. Over the next 6 years, I worked my way up. First as an assistant marketing director, then as head of the entire function. We launched 2 new shop formats, updated vendor relationships, and established a profitable e-commerce engine. By then, I was 27 years old. Then everything shifted. Graham sat me down one night, abnormally silent, and mentioned the word leukemia. No build-up, no soothing tone, simply the facts. It's advanced. The prognosis isn't good. Treatments will buy time, not fix it. This hit me like a truck. But Graham was not searching for sympathy. He handled it like any other business problem. "We all die," he explained. "The only variables are when and how we use the time before." After that, our roles switched. I took on the responsibility of keeping him on track. Medications, doctor visits, ensuring he ate. Graham would roll his eyes whenever I reminded him, but he never fought me. He knew I was running things his way, which was direct and rigorous. At work, he progressively handed me the reins. First, lesser projects, then complete decision-making. He did not hover. If I made a mistake, he would sarcastically point it out before letting me rectify it. Employees who had previously looked at me as the youngster began coming to me first once Graham made it obvious that I was not a placeholder. I was the future. The disease had stripped some of his armor. Not entirely. Even though he was hooked up to IVs, he continued to scream out snarky lines. But in calmer moments, he revealed a side I hadn't seen. When I helped him into bed one night, he gripped my wrist with surprising strength and murmured, "You were the son I never allowed myself to have." That was Graham's way of delivering a sentimental nuke. I wasn't sure what to say. I only nodded since speaking would have been false. 8 months later, he was gone. He slept peacefully. The funeral was not large. Mostly business associates, a few distant relatives, and staff that admired him. I stood at the graveyard, understanding that the guy my parents had always characterized as cold and arrogant was the only one who turned up, the only one who had genuinely built me into someone capable of standing on his own. The mansion seemed empty without his scathing remarks booming through the halls. I'd find myself saving things that I thought he'd enjoy, or mentally planning how I'd tell him about a new technique before realizing he wasn't there anymore. But, whether I was in mourning or not, I did not neglect my business. If Graham taught me one thing, it was that action matters more than words. So I honored him by keeping Whitaker Home Collection strong and running business the way he taught me. Sharp, disciplined, and with no and half effort. This was my life for 3 weeks. Business, solitude, the heaviness of an empty house. Then the lawyer's letter arrived. A will reading was scheduled. I assumed it would be me, some business partners, and maybe a charity or two. I had no idea my parents were about to come back into my life. Weeks passed before I received a call from Caldwell, Graham's attorney. His voice sounded calm and prepared, as if he delivered this speech 100 times. "Noah, it's time we read Graham's will. I'll need you downtown next Friday." I responded, "Sure," before hanging up. I didn't think much about it until Friday came. I strolled into the marble lobby and spotted 2 folks I hadn't seen in 15 years. They were not invited. They interrupted Graham's obituary reading. They made enough noise in the foyer that Caldwell allowed them to seat so he could record their lack of standing. My parents. They walked in as if they belonged there. My mother donned a blazer that screamed outlet store business chic, with pearls swinging like she was auditioning for rich grandmother. My father wore a too-tight navy suit, his jaw clenched as if he were about to close a deal. Their gaze fixed on me and froze. "Noah," my mother gasped. "Look at you, honey." Dad gave a curt nod. "You've grown." "Yeah, tends to happen when you feed a kid instead of tossing him outside with a trash bag," I replied. The secretary blinked awkwardly and took us to Caldwell's conference room. A long table, legal documents neatly piled, and Caldwell at the head in his clean suit, adjusting his spectacles as if preparing to defuse a bomb. He cleared his throat. "Thank you for coming. We're here to read Graham Whitaker's last will and testament." My mother raised her hand, as if she were in school. Before you start, we're Noah's parents. Graham may have stepped in, but obviously family has rights. I smirked. Yeah, you remember that 15 years ago? Or just today? Caldwell disregarded the jab and opened the folder. He read steadily, without fluff. Graham Whitaker leaves the following to his legal ward. Noah Grant. Primary residence, valued at $1.8 million. Cash savings of $2 million. And 70% ownership of Whitaker Home Collections, valued at approximately $45 million. The words hung in the air, like smoke. I reclined back with arms folded. My parents sat transfixed, blinking as if their minds had short-circuited. Finally my mother said, That's everything. Caldwell nodded. Correct. Graham's instructions are clear. The estate passes entirely to Noah. My father sprang forward in his chair. This is outrageous. Graham manipulated him. We should at least, be co-managers. Noah is young, he needs guidance. I laughed. Guidance? You guys couldn't guide me to a bus stop. Caldwell raised his hands. I understand emotions are high, but Mr. Whitaker's wishes are explicit. If you'd like to contest, you may. I'll warn you, this document is airtight. Mom leaned in, false tears beginning to shimmer. We're not contesting. We just want to help. Noah, honey, you know paperwork like this is confusing. You shouldn't have to handle all this pressure alone. Let us manage it for you, just until you're settled. I stared at her. You kicked me out at 13. I think I'll manage a house deed without your supervision. Dad tightened his teeth and whispered, Ungrateful. Caldwell, obviously bored of the hoopla, stacked the papers. We'll reconvene later this week to finalize signatures. For today, let's adjourn. And just like that, the meeting ended. My parents followed me out of the building, almost rushing to keep up. Noah, wait, Mom said. Can we talk? Just dinner maybe, please? Normally I would have told them to shove it, but curiosity, and perhaps a sick sense of humor, had me nodding. Fine. One dinner tonight. We met in a mid-range Italian restaurant near my home. When I arrived they were already seated, menus untouched, and faces rehearsed. Mom started softly. We made mistakes. We know that. But you have to understand. Your father had problems back then. Gambling issues. It ruined our finances. And me? Well, I was dealing with depression. We weren't ourselves. I mixed my drink with a straw. You don't say. I thought kicking your kid out was just a new parenting trend. They giggled uneasily, then exchanged glances. And just like that, the sympathy act failed. Dad leaned in. We need help, Noah. Things haven't been easy. We're in debt. Your mom's medical bills alone. Mom cut him off, voice low and urgent. If you could spare $100,000, just to get us stable again. I laughed so loudly that the waiter glanced over. $100 grand? That's your opener? Not even a warm-up, just straight to 6 figures. Dad's cheeks turned red. You have millions now. Don't act like this is difficult. I reclined back, arms wide, and enjoyed the performance. Correction, I have millions. You have pasta you haven't ordered yet. Mom's voice became sharper. We're your parents. We deserve consideration. I shrugged. You deserved consideration 15 years ago. You didn't want it then. Silence extended. The waiter eventually arrived to take orders. Awkward as hell. I chose lasagna because I knew they couldn't afford more than excuses. Dinner ended quickly. They made another appeal for money. I told them to obtain a job. Dad said something about ungrateful children destroying family legacies. Mom wiped her eyes with a tissue, as if she were auditioning for pity. I walked out feeling lighter. Not because I saw them again, but because I was certain nothing had changed. Same entitlement. Same games. The only difference this time was that I had the upper hand. And watching them squirm for a handout was more valuable than the inheritance itself. A week later, I was back in Caldwell's office. This time, it was not just me and him. My parents had brought in their own counsel, a man in a wrinkled gray suit who appeared to have gotten lost on his way to traffic court. They strutted in behind him like kings, shoulders back, smirks painted on their faces, as if this was their victory lap. Ready to correct this little misunderstanding? My father asked, dropping his briefcase on the table as if he were preparing to buy the building. Misunderstanding? I inquired. Yeah, must have slipped Graham's mind when he raised me for 15 years and you didn't. Mom flashed me a phony smile. Noah, honey, we're not here to fight you. We just don't want you to drown in responsibilities you don't understand. A company worth millions, properties, assets, This isn't a toy box. I slumped back in my chair. You're right. It's not. That's why Graham actually trained me for this stuff while you were too busy pretending I didn't exist. Caldwell cleared his throat, then handed a binder across the table. Before this meeting continues, there are a few clarifications we need to put on record. Their attorney puffed up. We're prepared to challenge the will. These parents were clearly cut out unfairly. This boy, he pointed at me as if I weren't in the room, was manipulated. I grinned. Love when I get downgraded to, this boy. Makes me feel like a gladiator about to crush someone. Caldwell did not even blink. He opened the binder and began spreading everything out page by page. First, Noah was not just Graham's ward. At 16, Graham legally adopted him. Here are the documents, signed, sealed, and approved by the court. The lawyer's pen froze in midair. My mother's mouth absolutely fell. What? She hissed. That's impossible. Caldwell moved the papers closer. Not impossible. Legal fact, which means by law, Mr. and Mrs. Grant, you have no standing in this estate. Dad's cheeks got bright red. We are his biological parents. I shrugged. Congrats. Biology makes you donors, not parents. Caldwell persisted, calm as ever. Second, Mr. Whitaker anticipated this. He hired private investigators. We have reports documenting repeated attempts you both made over the years to extort money from him, including phone records, bank transfers, even emails. He made a tapping noise. It's all here, every attempt to squeeze him dry, and now, after his death, here you are again. Their lawyer shuffled papers as if he wanted to hide beneath the table. Caldwell was not done. Third, Mr. Whitaker left a personal letter. I'll read it now. He opened a page, cleared his throat and started. Noah, if they've shown up, I told you they would, they won't change. They'll circle back when they smell money. Don't let them take what you've earned. If they try, this letter is your shield. Remember, family isn't who brings you into the world. It's who shows up when the world walks out. The room was really silent. Caldwell then dropped the last hammer. And lastly, the nuclear clause. If anyone contests this will, all assets, house, savings, company, stake, automatically transfer to charity, specifically the Children's Cancer Foundation. To be clear, only parties with legal standing can trigger that clause. Outsiders can't, and Mr. and Mrs. Grant have no standing. I couldn't help it. I began laughing. So go ahead, sue me. The only thing you'll win is a donation drive. My mother smashed her hand on the table. This is theft. You can't steal our son and our inheritance. Funny, I commented, leaning nearer. Because last time I checked, you already threw your son out. Now you're just mad someone better took your spot. Dad snarled. You'll regret this. I leaned back, relaxed as always. No, I won't. But you might regret not investing in a mirror. That irritated Mom. You little brat. After everything we gave you. Like what? I interrupted. The night you dumped me on a sidewalk, or the years of silence after? Real Hallmark stuff. They tried to shout over me and use every guilt trip in the book. We are your true family. You'll understand what loyalty entails when you're older. Graham brainwashed you. But that was pathetic. They sounded like children whining after being caught stealing cookies. The lawyer attempted to pull them in, but they were too far gone. Mom gestured at me as if she were conjuring lightning. You think you're so clever, but you're still just a child. You'll fall apart without us. I smirked. I've been falling apart without you my whole life. Guess what? I'm still standing. Caldwell waved, and 2 building security guards entered. That will be all. Please escort Mr. and Mrs. Grant out. The look on their faces as security took a step forward was priceless. They began protesting, stating they had a right to be there and wanting to talk with someone higher up. But Caldwell simply closed his binder and announced, "Meeting is over." Watching my parents being marched out of that glass tower, screaming and writhing as everyone in the lobby stared. That was the kind of satisfaction money couldn't buy. Their screams of betrayal, loyalty, and blood rang around the marble hall. However, everyone else saw them as 2 entitled lunatics. Security took my parents out of Caldwell's office as if they were shoplifters who refused to confess they were caught. But I knew it was not over. People like them do not absorb no. They interpret it as, try again louder. I did not wait. I drove immediately to the courts to file for a temporary restraining order. The judge signed it that afternoon. That night a process server handed them the documents, and I emailed the case number to the police to ensure it was on file. I expected at least a week until the next stunt, but they didn't even allow me 48 hours. The driveway camera showed their rental car creeping in after dark, headlights lowered as if they assumed Hertz offered stealth mode for free. My mother was dressed like she was going to church, and my father looked like he was prepared to market himself as a motivational speaker. Both went up my driveway as if the place belonged to them. The doorbell continued to ring. They leaned on it, as if they were restarting the home. I opened the door just enough to obstruct the entryway. Restraining orders still active. You can't be here. Mom smiled with that phony kindness she often had for those she wanted something from. We just want 5 minutes. Great, I said. Take it outside the gate. You've got 4.5 left. Naturally they shoved past me, as if I were a rental property manager. Dad studied every part of the foyer, as if he were mentally listing everything on Craigslist. Mom trailed her hand along the banister, as if she were already deciding where to place her vases. This place, she remarked, glancing around in her sales pitch tone. It was meant for family. It is, I said. Just not the kind that abandons their kid and comes back 20 years later with a handout. That shattered her smile for a moment, then Dad stepped in. Drop the attitude. Without us, you'd still be nothing. You owe us. I cocked my head toward the corner where the red light flashed. Say it louder for the camera. Judges love this kind of material. His face turned crimson. Mom moved to the guilt trip script, telling me how difficult it was to raise children, how much they sacrificed, and how ungrateful I was. Dad used intimidation tactics, puffing his chest, lifting his chin, and screaming phrases about respect. It was like watching the world's worst performers compete to see who could sound the most delusional. I did not budge. I leaned against the wall and let them finish the script until they realized I wasn't interrupting. When they ran out of lines, I gestured towards the driveway. Time's up. Walk out, or the cops escort you. Dad smirked. Call them. We'll tell them our son locked his own parents out of their home. Perfect, I replied, immediately dialing. Make sure you spell trespassing right when you file your complaint. Cops arrived quickly than I thought. They were previously aware of the restraining order and had completed the necessary paperwork. They answered questions out of politeness, but their body language was clear. They were tired of repeat offenders wasting time. After a brief conversation, the police informed my parents that they had 60 seconds to go or they would be riding in the back seat. My mother gave one more sympathy speech, and my father murmured about misunderstandings, but it didn't matter. They returned to their rental and peeled out, looking smaller than I had ever seen them. For the first time, I recognized they were neither powerful nor frightening. They were simply noisy. The house felt different after they left. Not in a hefty way, but in the sense that no one was circling to take it. It was mine. Graham's legacy. And I wasn't going to let two freeloaders with my DNA rip it apart. I did not squander time. The next morning, I met with the operations and finance leaders. We tore into the firm as Graham would have desired. There's no fluff or dead weight to drag. We removed non-selling products, repaired the shipping system that was costing us money, and redesigned the web store so it didn't appear like it was constructed on dial-up. Within 2 months, internet sales had doubled. The physical stores eventually moved inventory when we stopped allowing boxes to rot in the back. By the end of the quarter, we had approved 2 new growth sites, the ones Graham had circled in his notes years prior. But this time, it wasn't a gamble. It was regulated, clean, and profitable. Employees noticed. They initially regarded me as if I had been fortunate enough to inherit a business from my uncle. But when problems were fixed before they snowballed, paychecks were delivered on time, and I was present rather than hiding in some corner office, they began bringing me serious issues before they became fires. That is how you gain trust. Not with speeches, but with representatives. At home, I kept going through Graham's notes. There was one box I hadn't opened until recently, a wooden chest that he kept shut. Inside were ledgers, correspondence, and a stack of envelopes labeled with the year. His method of leaving me breadcrumbs. The most recent one stated, "When you are ready." Inside is a single sheet of paper. Trust yourself. Do not wait for permission. Build it better than I did. Short, crisp, and straight to the point. Exactly like him. I still had the cameras rolling. Maybe my parents will try again. Perhaps they won't. Entitlement does not die. It simply hides until it believes you're exhausted. But I was not exhausted. Every time I drove by the lot where our new store was being built, every time a balance sheet showed black instead of red, And every time I closed up the house knowing it was safe, it seemed like another nail in their coffin of control. They got their shot when I was a kid. They threw it aside. Graham scooped it up and transformed it into something. And now it was up to me to help it thrive rather than just survive. That is what kept me moving forward. The last time I saw my parents was on a blurry video from outside the fence. They drove slowly, windows down, staring like visitors who couldn't buy the ticket inside. They did not stop. They did not ring. They just peered, undoubtedly aware that the only way they'd ever see the interior was through the security camera. I didn't wave. I did not even step outdoors. I simply let the camera film them drive away, smaller and smaller, until they vanished. Graham shared with me once. Some people grow when they lose power. Others shrink. Your parents, they'll shrink. You better grow. I didn't understand it then. Now I do. And while I stood in the office looking at our quarterly stats on the screen, hearing staff joke in the hallway, and watching construction crews break ground on new stores, I realized I was maturing. My stepdad hid my college acceptances, claimed he was protecting us from debt. But his control backfired. My mom left him and the family chose me. I'm an 18-year-old who thought I got rejected on all of my college applications. By April, every email I received was a rejection. It was devastating. I busted my buttocks in high school and couldn't understand why I didn't get into anything. My stepfather continued encouraging me not to worry, and that community college was a wonderful starting point. He's long argued that community colleges are a better option than universities. I assumed he was trying to make me feel better about the rejections, but it always bothered me how fast he discounted the possibility of me attending a 4-year university. It turns out I wasn't really rejected everywhere. My stepfather intercepted my acceptance letters and emails and only showed me rejections. I had utilized a Gmail account for applications that he had helped me set up. He insisted on keeping the password for emergencies. Little did I know, he went into the settings and created a filter that would automatically delete or hide any emails that appeared to be acceptances. On top of that, he was grabbing physical mail from institutions before I saw it. I never beat him to the mailbox after school, so I didn't think much of it. I hadn't realized he was removing my college letters and storing them in his home office. I only found out about this by chance. A week ago, I received a call on my cell phone from an unfamiliar number. When I answered the phone, it was an admissions officer from one of the universities I had applied to. She said they hadn't heard from me and wanted to know if I was still interested since the deadline to accept my spot had passed a week before. I was like, "Excuse me, what spot?" I nearly assumed it was a prank. She stated that I had been admitted to their university, and they were disappointed I hadn't responded. I informed her I hadn't received any acceptance letters or emails. I thought I had been rejected. She graciously suggested that I check my email spam or junk folders, and that if I was still interested, I might be able to enroll later. After hanging up, I went through my email account. That's when I saw something odd. An email from that college in the trash bin, marked as read. I began looking through the email settings and discovered the filter my stepfather had set up. It was configured to automatically erase emails containing terms such as congratulations, accepted, offer, admission, and so on. There were multiple emails from other colleges that had been discovered. I felt horrible when I realized that all of the rejections I saw could have been the only emails remaining since he had filtered out the acceptances. I wanted more proof, so I decided to look into my stepfather's home office when he was at work. In one of his desk drawers, I discovered a big folder hiding beneath other folders. When I opened it, I literally had to sit down since it included actual college acceptance letters addressed to me. I'm referring to large envelope shipments from at least 4 universities that I applied to, all of which were opened. This man has some nerve. He kept them locked away all along while I was moping around, believing I wasn't good enough to get in anywhere. In a couple letters he'd scribbled notes like "too expensive" or "nope" in ink. I was infuriated and terrified. I took the letters and printouts and confronted him that evening as soon as he returned home. I was quivering with rage, but I attempted to remain calm and simply asked him why he buried my college acceptances. At first he played stupid, saying, "I don't know what you're talking about." So I showed him the stack of letters. His face changed colors in amazement, and he became protective. He truly sighed and said he'd talk to me about them. Yeah, when did all of their deadlines pass? I requested an explanation, and he finally gave it. He didn't want me to go to university because it's too expensive, and he didn't want my mother to spend money on it. I was very furious. First and foremost, I've been working part-time and have saved some money for college. Plus, my mother had saved money for me before she married him. It's not entirely his money. Second, Even if money was an issue. What he did, sabotage me, is such a betrayal. I yelled at him, saying he had no right to make this decision for me or my mother. He began roaring back that I should be glad that he is looking out for me and that if I attend community college for 2 years before transferring, I will graduate debt-free. He kept saying that he was doing me a favor by preventing me and my mother from incurring massive debt for a meaningless degree. I told him it was not his decision to make, and burying my acceptance letters was a horrible selfish act. It became heated. He basically urged me to quiet up and not overreact. He told me I needed to be practical and that in our family we are not going to waste money on a luxury college when community college is available. I was so enraged that I literally saw red. I yelled back that he had ruined my prospects of attending a school I had fought hard to get into. Because of him, the deadline for one school had already gone, and I'm not sure what else I missed. He really rolled his eyes and said, "It's not a big deal. You can start at community college and maybe transfer later. Stop making this a bigger deal than it is." Then he had the nerve to tell me not to inform my mother about anything. He knew she would be devastated if she found out. My mother was out of town visiting my grandparents for a few days. And Dad says, "There's no need to worry your mom about this. She has enough on her mind. We'll talk it out and handle it ourselves." By handle it, he meant I should silently accept his choice, forget about those places, and stick to community college like he intended. I told him straight out that I wasn't going along with it. This was my future, and he'd gone too far. He became very chilly and said something like, "You'd better reconsider making this into a crusade, young lady. Don't make me out to be the bad guy here. I did what I had to do." It sounded menacing, like he was warning me to keep my mouth shut. Right now, I'm stuck at home alone with him till my mother returns in 2 days. I haven't told her yet, but I will as soon as she gets home. I texted her and asked when she'd be back. But I didn't want to surprise her with this while she was visiting my grandparents. She responded, stating she'd be home shortly and asking whether everything was fine. I simply answered, "We'll talk when you get back." I believe she sensed something was wrong since she kept asking if my stepfather and I were getting along. I had to lie and claim we are fine. In actuality, I seldom speak with him, and he acts as if nothing occurred. I'm posting this because I'm extremely annoyed and angry. My stepfather literally attempted to take my future because he did not want to spend money on me. It's quite domineering and deceptive. I can't even get my brain around it completely. I'm not sure what will happen when I tell my mother, but I know it will blow up. She has no idea he did this, and she will be outraged and heartbroken because he kept it from both of us. I also don't know what I can do about the colleges. Did I lose all of my offers? Can I salvage any of this? I feel compelled to try, yet I'm still surprised that anything happened at all. Update 1. So, my mother returned from her trip, and I told her everything. I didn't even wait for her to take off her jacket before blurting it out. I was so desperate for her to know. My mother was devastated and outraged. I've never seen her react like that. First, she was stunned, asking me again, "He did what? Are you absolutely sure?" When I showed her the tangible letters in my palm, her countenance sank. Then she began sobbing and apologizing to me, something I did not expect. She continued screaming, "I'm so sorry, I had no idea, I should have known something was wrong." Her amazement quickly evolved to wrath. I was surprised at how upset she became because my mother is generally a quiet, conflict-avoidant person, but she was furious that he had gone behind our backs and wrecked up my future. She started saying things like, "All those nights we sat with you upset over those rejections, and he knew you weren't rejected. How could he do this to you? How could he do this to us?" It was a lot. Of course, I was irritated as well. But knowing how it broke my mother's heart added another element. She felt deceived both on my behalf and as his wife. He completely broke her confidence as a partner by making such an important decision concerning our life without consulting her. We didn't wait an hour before facing my stepfather jointly. He returned from running errands and discovered us in the living room, and he could tell by our expressions that the jig was up. My mother instantly laid onto him. I have never heard her yell at anyone like that. It was an all-out explosive fight. She screamed at him, wondering how he could hide her daughter's college acceptance letters. My stepfather went right into defense mode. He used the same justifications he offered me, stating he was simply thinking about our budget and trying to keep my mother from wasting money on a large university when community college is just as good. He kept saying that education is too expensive and that we should be careful with our money. That irritated my mother even more. She exclaimed, "Our money? Since when is it just your money? We saved that money for her education." To clarify, my mother has a separate little savings account designated for me. Some of it was money my father, her ex, left for me when he died, and some of it was simply mom's savings over time. My stepfather is aware of this, and I believe he has always disliked the fact that money was set aside for me to attend college. But he has never said it directly. Now, he practically admitted that he didn't want any money, hers, his, or mine, going toward my 4-year education. The argument was really intense. There was a lot of shouting back and forth. My mother described what he did as financially controlling and a tremendous breach of trust. He exclaimed that she was very passionate and not thinking clearly about the costs. At one point, he stated, "If you two would stop and think logically, you'd be thanking me for saving you from a huge financial mistake." That made me turn crimson again. I warned him that no one would ever praise him for being a manipulative liar. My mother backed me up, saying his behavior was terrible and that he had lied to both of us. Things escalated to the point that he began to use the cold, furious tone with me again. He pointed at me and said I was making this a larger problem than it should be. He had the audacity to add, "Kids get rejected from college all the time and survive. You'd have been fine at community college, you still will be if you stop this nonsense." I responded that the problem was that he took away my choice and lied about it. Mom was outraged and told him that this was not his decision to make. He then blatantly threatened me. He went on, "If I keep trying to turn his wife against him, and if I insist on making this into some giant drama, then I could just pack my things and get out of his house." That was correct. He literally threatened to toss me out for calling him out on his nonsense. My mother immediately said, "She's not going anywhere. If anyone should be leaving, it's you for pulling the trick." He grew even louder, shouting over her, "I'm not going anywhere. This is my house. I pay the bills, so I make the rules." It was horrifying at the time. I've never seen him that enraged. I was worried he'd seize my belongings and throw them on the lawn right then and there. My mother informed him that if he didn't calm down, she would call the police, which surprised me. He was like, "Oh, now you're threatening me with police. Unbelievable." He just threw his hands up and rushed out of the home to cool off. He drove off in his car after that, I believe to go away for a while. My mother hugged me and told me I wouldn't be kicked out and that she would sort it out. I could tell she was still digesting the shock, but she completely supported me in front of him, which felt nice. The house is quite tense right now. When he returned later, we largely avoided each other. Nobody apologized, and nothing was actually resolved. It's just the Cold War atmosphere. My mother and I are kind of sticking together, while he is off stewing by himself. He's plainly upset that I told her and that we ganged up on him. He seldom speaks to either of us, except to make snarky remarks like, "Nice of you two to consult me on your big life decisions," when he overhears us discussing college matters. It's awkward as hell. I'm not sure what the next step is. My mother mentioned that she might stay at a friend's house with me for a few days to put some distance between us and him, but I'm not sure if we will. She is concerned about leaving her home in such a state. And honestly, I'm terrified that if we leave, he'll do something weird with my belongings or the funds. Right now, I'm ignoring him and concentrating on damage control in my college position. Update 2. Thank you to everyone who recommended it. I spent the past few days calling every college that appeared to have accepted me to explain the issue and see if they would still uphold my admission or allow late enrollment. It has been crazy, but I have some good news on that front. 3 of the universities I contacted claimed they would still accept me, either in the late fall or spring session. I could not believe it. I honestly thought I was ruined and would have to wait an entire year or so. But I explained what happened, stating simply that I missed the deadline due to a family emergency, mix-up. One of these universities was one of my top picks when I applied. A nearby university. And, get this, they told me I'm still eligible for a half scholarship they provided when I was admitted. The scholarship money had yet to be allocated elsewhere. So, if I enroll in the spring semester, I can still use it. I took a double take on the phone when they mentioned it. It feels like a big relief after all of this stress. The other 2 colleges stated I could attend the forthcoming spring semester as well, but without particular scholarships, but I might still receive some financial assistance. I will have to check. Regardless, I now have options beyond community college, which is a huge relief. I was scared none of these would work out due to missing deadlines, but it appears that at least a few places are sympathetic, or still have room. I believe the person who called me in the first place wanted to fill their class, which is why they reached out, and the fact that I got decent marks and such undoubtedly helped persuade them that I didn't intentionally miss the deadline. While I was performing all of this, my stepfather kept a close eye on me. I attempted to do the majority of it while he was at work or out of the home, but I'm sure he overheard one of my phone calls. He began questioning me about who I was speaking with, and I simply stated that I was speaking with college admissions offices without providing any other information. He seemed irritated that I was still pursuing the university option. After our previous argument, I believe he expected me to simply accept going to community college. There's no possibility, buddy. When he found out that I had been accepted to a university with a scholarship for the spring semester, he went completely crazy. I'm not sure if my mother told him or if he found out for himself. I had told my mother privately about the offers and the scholarship, and she was overjoyed for me as well. We were talking about how to organize things for spring, and he probably caught wind. Next thing I know, there's another massive shouting match going on. This time, my stepfather was enraged. He was yelling at my mother that she was about to make the biggest mistake of her life by allowing me to go to some university and spend all of our money. He effectively issued an ultimatum. She had to choose between supporting me and attending one of these universities or keeping their marriage together. Yes, he actually went there. It is either her or me. He told my mother that if I go to university and she helps me in any way, financially or otherwise, she will choose me over him, which he will not tolerate. What type of adult man engages in a jealous power struggle with an 18-year-old over something like this? He kept ranting that I'm ungrateful, that I'm causing problems in their marriage, and that if she respected him, she'd stick to the original plan, community college. My mother was crying at this point, accusing him of trying to control her and isolate me. She said, "You're my husband, but she's my daughter. Why are you making me choose in the first place? We're supposed to be a family." His response was basically that I'm not his kid. Ouch. And he's not obligated to pay a dime for me, especially not for some fancy college plans. He said I'm almost 19 and an adult, and I can do whatever I want, but not with his money and not under his roof. I stayed out of this specific shouting match as much as I could. I was in the next room, but I could hear everything. My heart was pounding as he basically demanded that my mother stop supporting me. I did go in at one point when he stated I'm not his daughter, and I told him darn right I'm not, because my actual dad would never have pulled the trash you did. It probably wasn't the best idea to add fuel to the fire, but I was so angry. He yelled at me to stay out of it, saying it was between him and my mother. I yelled back that it involved me, so I am in it. Mom tried to get me to go to my room. I eventually did, just to end the three-way yelling. I sat in my room listening to the rest. He kept at my mom, basically saying she's a bad wife if she sides with me. I heard him say something like, "If you do this, don't expect this marriage to continue." I refuse to be disrespected like this. My mom was sobbing and saying, "Why are you doing this? You lied to us, and now you want me to just turn my back on my daughter's dreams? You're insane." She also said something about, "How can you talk about respect when you went behind my back and destroyed something so important?" It went on for what felt like forever. Eventually things went quiet, and I heard a door slam. I'm pretty sure my stepdad slept on the couch, or at least in the guest room that night, because he didn't come to their bedroom. The next morning, I found my mom in the kitchen looking exhausted. She basically told me, "If he's forcing me to choose, I'll choose you. He can't call himself my husband and treat my child this way." I gave her the biggest hug and started crying because I was half afraid she would choose him. Their 5-year marriage versus me, who will hopefully be moving out soon for college. It was a crazy thought, but he had me paranoid. She told me that she was not abandoning me, and that she was sorry it had come to this. I could tell she was upset that her marriage was dissolving, but she was also adamant, saying, "We'll work out the money. I don't care what he says. I'm not letting you miss out on this opportunity." That was the first time in this whole ordeal I felt like things might actually turn out okay for me. Minus the whole family drama, of course. My stepdad didn't speak to either of us that morning. He left for work without a word. Honestly, at this stage I was staying as far away from him as possible. Anyway, I spent the day at the library using their Wi-Fi to handle some university stuff because I didn't want to do it at home where he might snoop. I also started quietly packing some of my important belongings in case things went south quickly. Update 3. A lot has happened. My mom, who has always been kind of passive and conflict avoidant, finally grew a spine. She did something I honestly didn't think she would ever do. She went and opened her own bank account and moved a chunk of money into it to pay for my tuition and living expenses for school. This is huge because my stepdad has controlled all the household finances for years. To explain, when they got married, he convinced her to merge accounts and let him manage everything since he's good with money. And to be fair, he makes more money than her. He's the primary earner. She has a part-time job. But it went from, "I'll handle the bills," to him having to approve every expense. He gave Mom a household budget and basically monitored what she spent. He even cut up one of her personal credit cards a couple years back, saying she didn't need it since they had a joint card. Yeah. Real controlling behavior that, in hindsight, was a bunch of red flags. She never stood up to that until now. After the ultimatum and seeing how far he'd go to control my future, something in her snapped. Without telling my stepdad, Mom withdrew a significant amount of money from their joint account, money that originated from her savings and my college fund, and deposited it in a new account only she has access to. This was effectively to make sure she could pay for my college directly with or without his permission. She also retrieved some important documents, birth certificates, etc., and stashed them safely, anticipating a possible separation. I only found out she did all this after the fact. She told me once it was done, and I was honestly so proud of her. It was like, finally, she's not letting him micromanage her or me. Well, when my stepdad discovered what she did, he retaliated in the pettiest and cruelest ways. First, he somehow got alerts or noticed the large withdrawal transfer. Of course he did. He likely checks the accounts daily. That same day, I found out our home Wi-Fi suddenly had a new password. He changed all the Wi-Fi passwords and likely even the admin settings, so I couldn't use the internet at home anymore. It was clearly aimed at me, because my mom has mobile data and didn't notice the Wi-Fi change until I told her I couldn't connect. He didn't even bother giving her the new password either, so maybe he wanted to spite both of us. Along with that, I got a lovely surprise when my phone stopped working. My stepdad removed my number from the family phone plan, basically cutting off my cell service. I'm pretty sure he did that out of pure spite to make it harder for me to communicate with anyone or call colleges, etc. Luckily my phone itself isn't tied to him. As soon as I realized what happened and informed my mom, she gave me one of her SIMs. She was outraged and promised to get my phone set up on her own plan ASAP. But it's just the level of vindictiveness. Like, who does that to their family? Cut off the internet and phone of an 18-year-old just to assert power. The worst part, he actually followed through on kicking me out of the house. After he realized my mom was moving money and likely planning to support me regardless of what he said, he went ballistic. He told me I was officially not welcome under his roof since I'm determined to disrespect him and bleed them dry. It was an extremely unpleasant discussion. Basically he aggressively told me, pack your junk and go out. Go live off your mother's pay elsewhere. My mom was at work when this blow-up happened, so it was just me and him. I didn't engage much. I just said, fine. I don't want to live here with you either. I was done trying to reason with this man. I grabbed as much of my stuff as I could in a couple suitcases and backpacks. I called my mom and let her know what was happening. She was terrified and told me to go straight to my aunt's house, my mom's older sister, and wait there. My aunt is an absolute saint. She showed up with her car within an hour to pick me up. By the time she got to our house, I was already outside with my bags because I didn't feel safe or comfortable staying inside with him any longer than necessary. He was sulking in his office, probably thinking he'd won or something by booting me. My aunt didn't even go inside, she just honked. I'm pretty sure he saw or heard and just didn't care. Or maybe he was relieved I was actually leaving. So yeah, I'm staying at my aunt's house now. She welcomed me with open arms, no questions asked. Apparently my mom had given her a heads up about the situation. My mom had been confiding in her after the first fight when things got really bad. My aunt told me I can stay as long as I need and that she's proud of me for standing up to my stepdad's nonsense. She also said something like, don't worry, we're not going to let him get away with this. I was still pretty upset and shell-shocked, but hearing that was reassuring. My mom didn't come with me to my aunt's, at least not yet. She stayed in the house with him for the time being, most likely to figure out her next steps and because she's not the type to leave her home easily. I think she wanted me out of there for my safety and sanity, but she's being strategic about her own exit. There are financial and legal things she's probably considering. We've been in constant contact though. Once I got to aunt's and got on Wi-Fi, I updated her. Now she's got me a cheap temporary phone plan of my own too. She told me not to worry and that this is not the end of my college plans. She's already paid the deposit for the spring semester at the university I chose, the one with the partial scholarship. She managed to do that before my stepdad possibly locks down the money. So the important stuff is secured. Meanwhile, the situation between my mom and stepdad is at a breaking point. They basically aren't talking unless they absolutely have to. She told me he's been alternating between angry, sulking, and trying to act like I'm the source of all their problems. He's mad that I turned her against him. Mom told me that last night he actually tried to apologize to her for the fighting. Not for what he did to me, mind you, but for the fact that they've been fighting, and he suggested that if I just apologized and agreed to forget about the university, I could move back home and things would go back to normal. She told him that there is no normal to go back to after what he did, and she said she's done tolerating his control. According to her, that made him switch back to anger quickly, and he accused her of valuing some bratty kid's whims over their marriage. I'm safe at my aunt's house, and my college future is back on track. It's unfortunate that this has happened in my family, but I'm also relieved to be out of that toxic house. Mom is now consulting with a lawyer, which one of my uncles assisted in arranging. More on that in the next update. I've been working extra hours at my part-time job for the fall and saving up so I have a cushion when I start school. My aunt refuses to take any rent or anything from me while I'm here, saying, "Focus on school and getting out of this mess." I'm so thankful for the support system on my mother's side of the family. My stepfather's last-ditch attempt to manipulate the situation backfired spectacularly. He apparently thought he could rally the extended family to his side by painting me as an ungrateful, entitled brat, and my mother as someone who is being duped by me, so this will most likely be my final update. My stepfather went into damage control mode after I moved to my aunt's house, and my mother openly planned to leave him. I believe he realized he was losing control and that people would eventually hear that his wife and stepdaughter had moved out, or kicked out in my case. So he contacted a bunch of our extended family, mostly on my mom's side, her siblings, and even some of her cousins who were close too. He tried to get ahead of the story by calling them and even writing this email detailing his version of events. I'm sure he thought he could make me look like the villain. I've seen the email he sent. One of my uncles emailed it to me. They're all on my side. It's a wild ride. In the email, my stepfather claims that I've become entitled and indoctrinated by the prospect of attending an expensive institution and that I've turned my mother against him to get my way. He actually wrote that I threw a tantrum after not getting into some schools and manipulated my mother into spending a ridiculous amount of money to indulge my dreams. Here's the best part. While trying to defend himself, he accidentally admitted what he did, writing, "I might have intercepted 1 or 2 college letters because I knew how much disappointment they would cause her if she got into a school we couldn't afford." There it is. He basically blurted out that he intercepted my mail, trying to frame it as if he was protecting me from disappointment. That's a completely twisted justification, and he should never have put it in writing, because intercepting mail that isn't addressed to you is a federal offense. 2 of my uncles, my mother's brothers, are lawyers, and when they saw that line, their jaws dropped. One of them literally responded to the email, pointing out in polite lawyer speak that my stepfather had just admitted to federal mail tampering and that he should be very careful what he says next. The uncle also coldly stated that his actions toward me were deceitful and potentially actionable. When my stepfather sent that email, I doubt he expected to be effectively threatened with legal action by his own in-laws, but that's what he got. According to what I hear, a bunch of family members basically blasted him after that. My aunt, the one I'm staying with, called him up and reportedly chewed him out thoroughly. I wasn't on the call, but she told me she gave him a piece of her mind for abusing my mother's trust and my future. My grandparents, mom's parents, are also furious with him, and no one in the family is on his side, especially after learning the full truth. In fact, his email did the opposite of what he intended, alerting everyone to how scheming and dishonest he has been. If he was hoping to put pressure on my mother by turning family against us, that plan imploded. My mother has officially filed for legal separation, which is the first step toward divorce in this country. She moved out of the house last week and is currently staying with my grandparents. She didn't want to stay under the same roof with him any longer, especially since we have family support. She took whatever personal belongings and important documents she could, and she's getting a good lawyer with the help of my uncle. My stepfather was served with the separation papers, and when he received them, he was enraged and in disbelief, pleading with her not to end their marriage over a disagreement about a bratty child. She told him it was too late, and he was the one who ended it by lying and betraying his family. I'm very proud of her for finally standing up for herself and me. It's not easy. I know she's been sad over the end of her marriage, but she keeps saying she feels relief now that she's made the decision. There's no more waffling. I'm doing okay, all things considered. I've officially enrolled in the university for the spring semester, attended a short orientation for spring admits, and signed up for classes. I was worried that all of this family drama would derail my college plans again, but my mother and I made sure that didn't happen. I'll be starting university next month, and I'm both excited and nervous. After everything that happened, it feels a little surreal that I'm actually going. We haven't decided what to do, if anything, about the whole mail tampering crime. My uncle said we could report it, but my mom is hesitant to drag this into a criminal case unless absolutely necessary. It could be used as leverage in the divorce to get him to agree to terms favorable to my mother, such as not contesting certain things. I don't really care as long as I'm away from him and he can't mess with my life anymore. Right now he's keeping a low profile after basically everyone pointed out how badly he screwed up. I wouldn't be surprised if he eventually tries to slink back and apologize when he realizes the legal separation is real, but that won't help anything. My parents kicked me out for getting a job instead of babysitting their kids. Weeks later, their perfect life collapsed as I exposed their lies. My parents cut me off because I got a job and couldn't babysit anymore, and then lied to the rest of the family when asked about it. So I went nuclear and exposed them. And now they're attempting to force me back because their new babysitter has quit. I obtained my first job 2 months after I turned 17. But when I told my parents about it, their first words were, "Who's going to babysit our kids?" I should have been surprised, but I wasn't since I knew my parents. So I said, "Well, who's going to pay for my college tuition?" I intended to stump them. You know, they had previously informed me that if I wanted to attend college, I had to pay for it myself. But instead of yielding, they began laughing as if my remark was the funniest thing in the world. You're a woman, and women should be grateful for the opportunity to care for children, whether it's free or paid. Of course, in my situation it was free. My father then stepped in with some wise words. You don't just get to be selfish and abandon the family. Julia, do you know how much a babysitter for 4 kids costs these days? I tried to make a compromise by telling them that some of the money I earned from work could go to them and the kids, but they didn't care. And they felt that because I wasn't spending my life caring for their children, I deserved to be kicked out. They instructed me to pack my stuff and go. I simply rolled my eyes in return. I ran upstairs, but for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to feel it. The sadness, the betrayal, and most importantly, the grief of knowing that I would never know a life where my parents loved me. I didn't bother wiping away the tears, instead focusing on packing as many clothes as possible into a rucksack. After 10 minutes they yelled at me to hurry up and we departed for my cousin's. On the way there, my parents were attempting to persuade me to reconsider. My father reminded me of how much my brothers adored me, or more particularly, how no one else could make them stop sobbing like I could. Their manipulation wasn't even very good, but for some reason, I felt bad. I started pondering whether I was truly selfish. My mother even began crying, not because she missed me, but because they suddenly had to pay for a babysitter. So when we arrived at my cousin Susan's house and they drove away without saying goodbye, I felt even more guilty, especially when she opened the door, since her face instantly lit up with delight and she gave me the first genuine smile I'd seen in a long time. Kindness felt so foreign to me that as soon as we stepped inside, I burst into tears. Her face sank and she attempted to console me. Okay. Kind of. My love, why don't you just help your parents out a little? Help. I'd cut off friends, dropped my grades, and given up everything to care for their children. I didn't mean to yell, but I couldn't stop the rage inside me. I turned to face her, disgusted by her offer. But I noticed a genuine shock on her face. Your parents told me you were acting entitled and just didn't want to help out when you had nothing to do all day. I burst into tears again, but this time in her arms. I told her the complete truth. Why I ended up at her house, while she embraced me and assured me I would be secure under her roof. Surprisingly, she appeared anything but angry. But I soon realized she was more than simply angry. I ended up weeping myself to sleep that afternoon. I didn't get up until a few hours later, when I heard Susan yell. It was located in the room next door. When I heard the fury in her voice, I sat up straight. She was normally a very quiet, timid person, so hearing her say this was really unexpected. It was clear that she was speaking to my parents. I couldn't understand what she was saying, but I knew she was putting it on them. I remember feeling a genuine smile go across my face. It was the first time anyone had stood up for me. When I heard her hang up, I lay back down and appeared to be still sleeping. Without realizing I was awake, she began speaking aloud, something Susan hadn't done since I was a child. But what she said made me shoot up. Apparently my parents had already hired a new free babysitter. They always had one ready. This whole affair was a ruse to get me kicked out of the house and out of their hair for good. After all of this, Susan sighed and said I deserved better before going to bed. And that was when I sat up, realizing she was correct. I deserved better parents. And if I couldn't get it, I deserved at least a refund. My plan was bulletproof. Do you realize that every family has one gossipy aunt? Well, we have one too. And I texted her every little juicy detail about what happened between me and my family. The message ended up being 1,400 words long. I quickly turned off my phone, fearful of the consequences. And the next morning, when I finally had the courage to switch it back on, my soul departed my body. My phone was flooded with notifications, not just from my gossipy Aunt Julia, but from nearly every family member I had contact information for. Aunt Julia apparently took my 1,400-word text and immediately forwarded it to everyone in the family group chat. I went through the texts, my heart beating against my chest. There were dozens of them. Some people defended my parents, claiming I was simply a dramatic teenager, but a surprising amount supported me. My Uncle Joseph wrote a full paragraph about how upset he was with his sister, my mother, for treating me like a live-in nanny rather than her daughter. My grandmother Elizabeth wrote a note saying she was heartbroken and that she had raised her children better than this. Susan entered the guest room where I was staying and sat down beside me on the bed. She also held her phone in her hand. Susan grumbled, "Are you kidding? Julia lives for this kind of drama. But honestly, maybe it's good that everyone knows what's been going on." I wasn't sure about that. On the one hand, it felt fantastic that people finally believed me. On the other hand, I knew my parents would be furious, and I still needed to figure out what to do next. I had a job, but no permanent residence. I was still in high school, and despite everything, I missed my younger siblings deeply. My telephone rang. It was my father phoning. I looked at Susan, terror building in my chest and my hands trembling slightly, but I knew I had to confront them eventually. I took a deep breath and pressed the accept button. I answered the phone, ready for the impending blast. I was not disappointed. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" My father's voice was so loud that I had to pull the phone away from my ear. Susan could also hear it and her eyes widened. I didn't have a chance to react before he resumed his outburst. He told me I was dead to him, that I had disgraced them in front of their entire family, and that I should forget about ever returning home. I just sat there, taking it all in, my eyes welling up with tears again. When he eventually ran out of steam, all I could say was, "I didn't mean for Aunt Julia to tell everyone." "You stupid, ungrateful," he repeated, but I heard my mother in the distance. She grabbed the phone from him. Her voice was icy cold as she spoke. "Julia, you've made your choice. Don't expect any support from us moving forward. Not for college, not for your phone bill, nothing." I felt my stomach drop. I hadn't even considered all of those practical aspects. My phone was still on the family plan. I was banking on them to help me with college. "What about my stuff?" I said, my voice soft. "You took what you needed," my mother responded. "Anything else we'll donate if you don't arrange to pick it up by the weekend." The call ended abruptly. I sat there, staring at my phone and feeling absolutely overwhelmed. Susan wrapped her arm around me and squeezed. "Well, that sounded pleasant," she remarked, attempting to lighten the atmosphere. "Don't worry about your stuff. We'll go get it tomorrow while they're at work." I nodded, still shocked. My parents had virtually rejected me for working part-time at a coffee shop. What type of parents did this? Susan called in ill from work the next day, so we drove over to my folks' house. I still had my key so we could enter in without issue. The home was peaceful. My parents were at work while my siblings attended school and daycare. It felt strange to be back so soon, as if I had broken in rather than returned home. I promptly walked to my room and began gathering everything that I couldn't fit in my backpack the first time. My favorite books, more clothes, my laptop, and some photos of my siblings that I kept on my desk. Susan was in my parents' home office as I packed. I had no idea what she was doing, but I was focused on grabbing my belongings and getting out before anyone arrived home unexpectedly. Susan carried a folder under her arm as we left. I asked her what it was, and she simply shrugged and said she'd tell me later. We packed my belongings into her car and headed back to her flat. Susan finally showed me what she had grabbed when she returned to her apartment. It was a folder that contained my birth certificate, social security card, and other crucial paperwork. She had also taken my parents' spare credit card, which they kept for emergencies. "You're going to need these," she said, "and they owe you for all the free babysitting." I was shocked. "We can't use their credit card. That's stealing." Susan rolled her eyes. "Relax. We're not going on a shopping spree, but you need clothes for work, a new phone plan, and some basic necessities. They owe you at least that much." I wasn't comfortable with it, but there weren't many alternatives. I had $50 and would not receive my first paycheck for 2 weeks. So I reluctantly consented to use the card, but only for things that were really necessary. We went to the mall in the afternoon. I purchased a few black t-shirts and slacks for my coffee shop work, as well as a low-cost prepaid phone and toiletries. Overall, we spent around $200 on the card. Still, I felt awful about it, despite Susan's assurance that it was nothing compared to what a true babysitter would have cost them over time. The next day, I worked my first shift at the coffee shop. I was nervous but delighted to start making my own money. The shop was called The Daily Grind. I know, it's quite original. Jaime, the manager, was really cool and patient during my training. I messed up a couple orders and struggled with the espresso machine, but it wasn't too horrible. When I returned to Susan's after my shift, I noticed 3 missed calls from an unknown number. I paused before returning the call, concerned that it could be my parents on another phone. It was not. Emma, my younger sister, was using my older brother's iPad. She was just 10. But she managed to remember my phone number. She was crying, asking why I had left and when I would return. It broke my heart to hear her upset. I attempted to explain in a way she could understand without criticizing our parents. I told Mom I had a job and needed to move closer to it, but I still loved her and my other siblings very much. She didn't fully understand, but she made me promise to come see her soon. I promised, even though I had no idea how I was going to do it. I was a complete wreck after that call. Susan recommended we have pizza and watch idiotic movies to take my mind off things. It helped a little, but I kept thinking about my siblings and how much I missed them. The following few days settled into a pattern. I'd go to work, then return to Susan's, complete my homework, and repeat. I was constantly fatigued from trying to stay up with academics while working almost every day after class. But at least I was earning money now. About a week after everything went down, my Aunt Julia texted me, asking if I wanted to come to Sunday dinner at her place. She indicated that my grandparents will be there, as well as other relatives who wanted to visit me. I hesitated. Was this some sort of trap? However, Susan believed it would be beneficial for me to see supporting family members. That Sunday, Susan drove me to Aunt Julia's place. As soon as we went in, my grandmother raced over and grabbed me tightly. She was crying, so I started crying too. I had no idea how much I wanted a grandmother's embrace until that moment. The supper was genuinely enjoyable. Nobody pressed me to talk about my parents, but they made it apparent that they were there for me. Even before we left, my grandfather slipped me an envelope. I opened it in the car and discovered 5 crisp $100 bills inside. I tried to call him and tell him it was too much, but he refused to take it back. He explained that it was to assist me get back on my feet. The money was a big comfort. I quickly used some of it to switch from my parents' phone plan to my own. I also opened a bank account without my parents' names, as Susan had instructed. Things seemed to be going well until they didn't. 2 weeks after I moved in with Susan, I returned home from school to find her sitting at the kitchen table, serious expression on her face. "We need to talk," she continued, motioning for me to sit down. My heart fell. Was she kicking me out too? Where might I go? "Your mom called me today," Susan said. "They've noticed the charges on their emergency credit card." I felt nauseous. I should have known they'd examine the statements or receive a buy notification. What looked to be a spare card was one that was routinely monitored. "What did she say?" I inquired. "She accused us of theft and threatened to call the police if we didn't return the card and repay every penny," Susan said grimly. "But here's the kicker. She also wants you to come home." I was shocked. What? Why would they want me back after everything that happened? Susan's expression became stern. Because their new babysitter quit after just 1 week. Apparently 4 kids under 10 is too much for most people. Who knew? I chuckled cruelly. Obviously that was the cause. They did not miss me. They missed out on free childcare. "I'm not going back," I stated firmly. "I can pay them back for the card from my paychecks, but I'm not going back to being their slave." Susan nodded, relieved. "That's what I told them. But they're pretty upset about the money. Your mom mentioned something about small claims court." I had a flicker of panic. Could they actually take us to court? Will we go into trouble? I still had the majority of my grandfather's $500, so I could repay them straight away. But the entire experience left me feeling uneasy and angry. The following day at school was dreadful. I could not focus on anything. I was expecting authorities to turn up and arrest me for credit card fraud or something. By midday, I was a nervous wreck. My friend Martha saw something was awry and brought me out to the courtyard to discuss. I wound up telling her everything. She was horrified at what my parents had done. "That's actual child neglect," she remarked. "They can't just throw you out because you got a job. You're still a minor." I hadn't really considered it that way. I was so used to being regarded as an adult at home that I forgot I was still legally a child. Martha's mother was a lawyer, and she advised I speak with her about my possibilities. I hesitated. I didn't want to involve more people in my family drama, Martha insisted, and she took me to her house after school. Mrs. Thompson, Martha's mother, listened to the entire narrative without interrupting. When I concluded, she had a lot of detailed questions regarding dates, what was said, and who else was aware of the issue. I responded as best I could. "Julia, what your parents did is not okay," she finally said. "They're legally obligated to provide for you until you're 18. They can't just kick you out because you won't babysit." She told me that I had options. I could apply for emancipation, which would legally make me an adult before I turned 18, or we could report my parents to Child Protective Services, which could force them to return me or place me in foster care. Neither choice sounded ideal. Emancipation would include accepting full adult duties at a time when I was already struggling to manage school and job, and CPS may take my siblings away as well, which I strongly opposed. Mrs. Thompson must have noticed my hesitancy. She proposed a third option: have another relative apply for interim guardianship. That way, I could legally stay with someone like Susan or my grandparents without causing my parents any trouble. I thanked her for her advice and agreed to think about it. On my way back to Susan's, I received a text message from an unfamiliar number. My youngest brother, Alex, was using my father's old phone. He said my parents were arguing all the time now, and the house was a disaster without me there. Reading his messages made my heart ache. I missed him and my other siblings a lot. When I returned to Susan's, I found a surprise waiting for me. My grandparents were sitting in the main room with serious attitudes. For a brief moment, I thought something horrible had happened. "Don't look so worried," my grandmother replied, patting the couch next to her. "We just want to talk about what happens next." They had learned about the credit card situation from my mother, but unlike my parents, they were not upset. They were concerned. They said I shouldn't be working so much while finishing high school. They urged me to focus on my schooling. My granddad cleared his throat. "We have a proposal for you. We'd like you to come live with us until you graduate. We have plenty of room, and you won't have to work so many hours to support yourself." I was stunned. My grandparents lived in a lovely home about 30 minutes from my school. Moving in with them would solve a lot of problems, but I was concerned about imposing on them. They were presumably in their 70s and didn't want a teenager to spoil their retirement. "We've already discussed it with your parents," my grandmother said, noticing my uncertainty. "They've agreed. As long as you visit them and the kids every weekend." Obviously they had a condition. They still wanted to use my free babysitting services, but one day every week was far better than every day. And, as much as I enjoyed Susan's hospitality, living with my grandparents would be a major step up from couchsurfing. So I agreed. That weekend I relocated my belongings to my grandparents' house. They'd turned their home office into a bedroom for me. The room was modest but comfortable, with a twin bed, a desk, and a bookshelf. My grandma had even purchased new bedding and drapes to make it feel like my personal area. My first night there, I slept better than I had in weeks. There was something relaxing about being in their house, away from the commotion of my parents' home, but still surrounded by family who cared about me. The next morning was Saturday, which meant I had my first visitation with my parents and siblings. My grandmother drove me over and promised to pick me up at 6 p.m. sharp. I was nervous the whole way over. When we arrived at my parents' house, my siblings ran out the front door. Emma rushed into my arms, and the smaller ones crowded around me, all chattering at once. I hugged them fiercely, realizing how much I missed seeing their little faces. My parents were standing in the doorway, observing. My mother's expression was unreadable, but my father appeared irritated. Possibly because he had to deal with the kids all morning before I came. After my grandma left, I spent the day playing with my siblings, assisting them with their homework, and keeping up with their lives. It was almost like old times, except for the tension that existed whenever my parents were in the room. My mother ultimately cornered me in the kitchen as I was preparing lunch for the children. "So you're too good to live here anymore, but you'll take handouts from your grandparents," she told me with a sneer. I tried to remain cool. "I'm just trying to finish high school without being homeless," I said, concentrating on making sandwiches rather than looking at her. "You were never going to be homeless," she remarked. "You're so dramatic." I bit my tongue to prevent from mentioning that they were the ones who kicked me out. Instead, I simply carried the plates of food to the dining room for my siblings. The rest of the day was awkward, but doable. My father mainly ignored me, which was great with me. At 6 p.m., my grandmother's automobile drew up outside. I hugged my siblings farewell and promised to come next weekend. My mom called after me as I walked out the door. "Don't forget to bring your babysitting money next time." I turned, perplexed. "What babysitting money?" She rolled her eyes. "The $500 you owe us for stealing our credit card." I was going to protest, but concluded it wasn't worthwhile. I simply nodded and left. In the car, I informed my grandmother what had happened. She was angry, but said nothing until we were halfway home. "Your mother always had a selective memory," she finally admitted. "She seems to have forgotten all the money they saved using you as a nanny for 5 years." I was startled. My grandma had never reprimanded my parents in front of me before. It felt good to have someone else see the unfairness of the situation. Life at my grandparents' place rapidly settled into a new pattern. I went to school, worked less shifts at the coffee shop, and focused more on homework. My grades began improving almost immediately. On weekends I went to see my siblings as arranged, but I dreaded the encounters with my parents. The credit card issue was handled when my grandfather insisted on paying it off himself, claiming that it was worth every penny to get me out of that toxic environment. I agreed to pay him back, but he dismissed my concerns. A month after I moved in with my grandparents, I received some surprising news at school. My English teacher, Mrs. Melissa, invited me to stay after class. She gave me an essay I'd written on family relations and said it was one of the best she'd ever read from a kid. "Have you thought about applying for college scholarships?" she asked you. "With your writing skills and grades, you could qualify for some good ones." Given everything else going on in my personal life, I stated that I hadn't given college much thought lately. Mrs. Melissa informed me of numerous scholarship opportunities designed exclusively for children who had overcome difficulty. She even volunteered to help me with my applications. For the first time in months, I felt optimistic about my future. I began exploring colleges and scholarships with fresh interest. My grandparents were helpful, guiding me through the applications and even taking me on campus tours at a couple nearby universities. When my parents discovered out, they were not pleased. During one of my weekend visits, my father noticed me working on a scholarship essay on my laptop. "College?" he mocked. "What a waste of money. You should be saving up to get your own place instead of mooching off your grandparents." I ignored him and continued typing. This only made him furious. "You know we're not paying for any of it, right? Not a single penny," he muttered. I gazed up at him calmly. "I know. I'm applying for scholarships and financial aid." He appeared unhappy that his statement hadn't irritated me more. He walked away, mumbling something about ungrateful kids who believe they're too good for honest work. For weeks I spent the majority of my free time applying for scholarships. Mrs. Melissa examined my essays, and my grandparents assisted me in gathering all of the essential documentation. By the spring, I had applied to 6 different institutions and more than a dozen scholarship programs. The first acceptance letter arrived on a Tuesday in April. I received a half scholarship to attend state university. I was ecstatic, but it wasn't enough to cover all the expenses. I kept hoping for good news from other schools. That following week something unexpected occurred during my weekend visit to my parents' place. My mother inquired how my college applications were doing. It was the first time she had expressed any interest in my future goals. I told her about the admission from state, trying not to seem very enthusiastic because I knew she wouldn't like it. To my amazement, she did not make any snarky remarks. Instead, she nodded and continued. "Your Aunt Julia went there. She liked it." It wasn't much, but it was the most support I'd received from either of my parents in months. I choose to see it as a positive sign. The next big news broke 2 weeks later. I got an email message that altered everything. One of the National Merit Scholarships I applied for had chosen me as a finalist. If I won, it would pay for my whole 4-year tuition at any public university in the state. I was elated. My grandparents took me out to supper to celebrate reaching the finals. Susan drove over to join us. The finalist interviews were scheduled for the following week. I spent days preparing for the interview. My grandmother assisted me in selecting a professional suit consisting of a navy blue blazer and skirt that made me appear older than 17. My grandfather drilled me with practice questions until I could comfortably express my ambitions and aspirations. I was quite nervous on the day of the interview. The scholarship committee was made up of 5 members, each with strong academic qualifications. They asked about my essay, my experiences, and my future ambitions. I discussed my desire to become a child psychologist, which was driven in part by my own family dynamics experiences. I left the interview feeling like I had done my best, but I wasn't sure whether it was good enough. The results would not be released for another 2 weeks. The 2 weeks were the longest of my life. I obsessively checked my email, jumping whenever my phone produced a notification sound. My grandparents kept urging me to relax, that no matter what happened, we'd work it out. But I realized how much the scholarship would impact my life. Meanwhile, my relationship with my parents remained problematic. During my weekend visits, I noticed my mother making more of an attempt to be polite, even asking about school occasionally. My father was still aloof, but he wasn't aggressively hostile anymore. My siblings, of course, were always delighted to see me. Emma began phoning me every few days simply to chat, which I enjoyed. When I went, the younger ones would argue over who would sit close to me or show me their drawings first. These times made the awkwardness with my parents worthwhile. Finally, on a dreary Tuesday afternoon, the email came. I was at my grandparents' house doing homework at the kitchen table when my phone vibrated with a notice. The subject line said, "National Merit Scholarship Decision." My hands were shaking so terribly that I could barely open the email. My grandmother saw and approached behind me, laying a steadying hand on my shoulder. I took a deep breath and tapped the notice. The email opened, and I scanned the first paragraph, my heart beating. Congratulations. I didn't even have to read the rest. I had been awarded full tuition for 4 years at any public university in the state. I burst into tears as a rush of relief and delight washed over me. My grandmother hugged me hard and cried. My grandfather came in from the garage to see what was going on, and he was soon rejoicing as well. That evening, we held an impromptu party. Susan brought a cake, and Martha stopped by with balloons. Mrs. Melissa also made an appearance with a gift, a lovely leather-bound journal for my college years. In all the excitement, I almost forgot to inform my folks. I called them that night, anxious about their reaction but eager to tell the news. My mother answered the phone. I told her about the scholarship, trying to maintain a calm tone despite my excitement. There was a pause at the other end of the line. "Well," she finally said. "I guess all that studying paid off." It wasn't particularly enthusiastic, but it wasn't negative either. I decided to count it as a win. "Does this mean you're definitely moving away for college?" she inquired. I said that I was still selecting between colleges, but that I would probably be living on campus someplace. There was another pause. "The kids will miss you," she added quietly. And then, "We all will." It was the closest thing to admitting they cared about me that I'd heard in years. I wasn't sure how to answer. So I simply thanked her and said I'd see them over the weekend as usual. After that call, I sat on my bed for a while, reflecting on how much had changed in just a few months. I'd gone from being my parents' live-in nanny to living with my grandparents and receiving a full scholarship to college. It wasn't the road I had planned for my life, but it could be just what I needed. The next day at school, I found myself smiling for no apparent reason all day. The future, which had appeared so dark just months before, suddenly appeared bright and full of opportunities. I had folks who believed in me and supported my goals. And I began to realize that perhaps I had always earned that support. Things continued to improve as April progressed into May. I spent the majority of my time at my grandparents' house, which seemed more like home than my parents ever did. I continued to visit my siblings every weekend, but the visits became less unpleasant over time. My mother began making small talk with me, and my father at least stopped staring at me from across the room. Something unusual occurred on a Saturday in mid-May. I was playing with my younger brother in the living room when my mother walked in and stood there, watching us. After a few minutes, she cleared her throat. "Julia, can we talk in the kitchen for a minute?" My stomach immediately tightened up. Every time my parents wanted to communicate, it left me feeling bad, but I nodded and followed her. She was busy making coffee in the kitchen and didn't notice me. I simply stood there awkwardly, waiting for whatever bomb she was about to drop. "Your father and I have been talking," she added at length, "about your graduation next month." Oh, right, graduation. With everything else going on, I had scarcely considered it, but now that she'd mentioned it, I realized I had no idea who would attend the wedding. Will my parents show up? Would it be odd to have them and my grandparents in the same place? "We'd like to host a small party for you," she said. "Here at the house, after the ceremony." I must have appeared absolutely surprised because she giggled a little. "Don't look so surprised, you're still our daughter." I wasn't sure what to say. They had treated me as if I were nothing more than free labor for months, and now they wanted to celebrate my graduation. It did not make sense. "Why?" I blurted out, unable to stop myself. My mother's face sank a little. She set down her coffee cup and finally looked straight at me. "Because we're proud of you," she replied quietly. "The scholarship, college. You've done well, Julia." I simply stared at her. Who was this woman and what did she do to my mother? I wanted to know if she was okay or had been abducted by aliens. Before I could react, my father walked in. He nodded awkwardly at me before grabbing a beer from the fridge. "Did your mother tell you about the party?" he said. I nodded, still too perplexed to speak. "Good," he said. "We were thinking just family. Your grandparents, Susan, a few aunts and uncles, They included my grandparents and Susan, who had practically saved me from them. This was growing strange by the minute. That sounds nice, I said. Thank you. My father nodded again and left the kitchen. My mother went back to fretting over coffee cups. I dashed back to the living room as quickly as I could, my head spinning. That night I informed my grandparents about the party offer. My grandmother developed an odd expression on her face. Your Aunt Julia went to visit them last week, she told me. Had a long talk with your mother apparently. That explained a few things. Aunt Julia was my mother's older sister and the only person she would genuinely listen to. If Julia had confronted her about her treatment of me, it might have reached her in a way that no one else could. So, should I let them throw this party? I requested an answer. Or is it some kind of trap? My granddad chuckled. Not everything is a trap, Julia. Sometimes people just realize they've made mistakes and want to fix them. I wasn't sure about it, but I decided to give them the benefit of doubt. The next day, I texted my mother, saying I wanted to have the party. She replied with a thumbs-up emoji, possibly the most enthusiastic answer I'd ever received from her. Finals and graduation preparations took up the next few weeks quickly. I was placed 12th in my class, so I got to wear one of those expensive honor cords with my hat and gown. My grandparents were so pleased that they brought me shopping for a new outfit to wear under my gown. Martha and I spent the entire Saturday decorating our caps. Nonetheless, she persisted on mine in dazzling gold letters. It felt appropriate given what I'd gone through. Graduation day came with wonderful June weather. I got up early, too excited and frightened to sleep in. My grandma made her famous blueberry pancakes for breakfast, and my grandfather took shots of me as if I were a kid about to start kindergarten. The ceremony started at 2 p.m. When we arrived at school, the parking area was already full of families carrying balloons and flowers. I saw my folks' automobile right soon. It was difficult to miss, with all 4 of my siblings pressing their faces against the windows and waving madly at me. I waved back, experiencing a strange combination of emotions. Part of me was still upset at all they'd done, but another part was relieved they'd shown up. I had to line up alongside the other graduates as my family secured seats in the auditorium. Martha found me in line and we snapped photographs wearing our adorned caps. The entire experience felt strange, as if I were watching myself in a film about high school graduation rather than actually experiencing it. The ceremony itself was quite standard, boring speeches from the principal and valedictorian, with the band playing Pomp and Circumstance on an unending loop as we walked across the stage. When they called my name, I heard cheers from several sections of the audience. My siblings were the loudest, of course, but I could also hear Susan's voice and my grandfather's distinctive whistle. Afterward, in the commotion of families locating their grads, I was swept up in a frenzy of hugs and photos. Emma refused to let go of my waist, while my younger brother kept trying to steal my headgear. My parents appeared proud, with my father clapping me on the back and my mother fussing with my hair for photos. Martha raced up to give me one final embrace as we walked to the parking lot. Are you coming to Jacob's party tonight? She said. I shake my head. Family thing, I responded, nodding at my parents. Maybe I can stop by later. She shrugged. Text me if you escape, she remarked with a wink, then dashed off to join her family. We all drove back to my parents' house in a caravan, my parents' car with my siblings, my grandparents in their car, and me riding with Susan. Susan kept staring at me while we drove. Are you okay? She finally inquired. I nodded. Just weird, you know. A few months ago they kicked me out and now they're throwing me a graduation party. Susan smiled. People can surprise you sometimes. Not always in bad ways. When we arrived at the house, I was surprised to see balloons tied to the mailbox and a congratulations graduate banner hanging over the front door. Inside, the dining room table was heaped in food, including a cake with my name on it. More relatives arrived, including Aunt Julia, who hugged me so hard I feared my ribs would crack, Uncle Joseph, and a few cousins I hadn't seen in years. Even Martha's mother, Mrs. Thompson, who had given me legal counsel, came by with a gift card. The celebration was truly enjoyable. My siblings were on their best behavior. My parents were unusually kind, and everyone kept telling me how pleased they were of me. I was waiting for the other shoe to drop, for someone to mention childcare or for my father to make some sarcastic remark about how college was a waste of time, but it never occurred. After cake, my mother declared that it was time for gifts. There were the typical graduation gifts, money, gift cards, and a new laptop from my grandparents, which I almost cried over. But then my parents gave me a tiny package. There was a key inside. I stared at them, puzzled. It's to our house, my mother explained. We want you to know you always have a home here. Even when you're away at college. I simply stared at the key, absolutely stunned. My father cleared his throat. We didn't handle things well," he admitted hesitantly. "When you got that job, we were wrong to kick you out." Was this actually happening? Was my father genuinely acknowledging they were wrong? I looked around to see whether anyone else was as surprised as I was, but everyone was just smiling as if everything was perfectly normal. "Your Aunt Julia reminded us that parents are supposed to support their children, not the other way around," my mother replied. "We took advantage of you, Julia. And we're sorry." I couldn't believe what I heard. My parents actually apologized. I half expected the ceiling to collapse or aliens to suddenly invade. "We're also sorry about the babysitting," my father explained. "We've hired a real babysitter now for when you're not here." I looked over at my grandparents, who were beaming with joy. My grandmother gave me an encouraging nod. "Thank you," I eventually managed to say. "That means a lot." The remainder of the celebration passed in a blur. By the time everyone had left, it was nearly 9 p.m. I texted Martha that I couldn't make it to Jacob's party after all. I was too emotionally spent to deal with a high school rager. My grandparents were the last to depart. As they were leaving, my grandmother grabbed me aside. "Your parents called us last week," she explained quietly. "They wanted to know if we'd help them with your college expenses, whatever the scholarship doesn't cover." I was stunned again. "They did?" She nodded. "People can change, Julia. Sometimes they just need a wake-up call." After everyone had left, I found myself alone in the kitchen with my parents. We all avoided making eye contact, resulting in an awkward quiet. Finally my mother responded, "You're set for State University in August." I nodded. "Yeah, orientation is in July. I got assigned to Thompson Hall." "That's on the north side of campus, right?" my father inquired. "Near the library." I was astonished he knew that. "Yeah, it is." "How did you know?" He shrugged. "I looked it up. Wanted to know where you'd be living." We lapsed into another stillness, but this time it felt less awkward, like we were all simply getting used to our new normal. "You know," my mother remarked tentatively, "if you wanted to move back home for the summer, there's room." I thought about it for a bit. Part of me wanted to say no right once, but another part saw they were trying to make amends in their own awkward manner. "I'll think about it," I replied. I promised Grandma I'd help her with her garden this summer, but maybe I could split my time. They both nodded, seemingly content with the response. My father checked his watch. "It's getting late. Do you want us to drive you back to your grandparents?" I shake my head. "Susan's coming back to get me in a few minutes." As if on cue, my phone vibrated with a text from Susan informing me that she was on her way. I began assembling my graduation gifts. "Leave some of it here if you want," my mother advised. "For when you visit." When Susan's automobile arrived outside, my parents brought me to the door. My mother startled me with an embrace, while my father uncomfortably stroked my shoulder. "Congratulations again," my mother remarked. "We really are proud of you." As Susan drove me back to my grandparents' house, I reflected on how much had changed in just a few months. I had progressed from a free nanny who was not permitted to work to a soon-to-be college student with a full scholarship. When things became tough, I found out who actually had my back, and I discovered that I was stronger than I had realized. Most shockingly, I realized that people can change. My parents were not perfect. Not even close. However, they were making an effort, which was sufficient for the time being. I glanced down at the house key in my palm. Perhaps I'll spend some time at home this summer after all. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to, on my own terms. And it made all the difference.